should say good evening, Los Gatos, and welcome to the 2008 Los Gatos it's not that I'm doing State of the Town address. I kept thinking I'm always going to say State of the Union, but I got State of the Town right. As mayor of the town of Los Gatos, it is my honor and my privilege to deliver the State of the Town address. Up here at the dais with me this evening is our Vice Mayor, Mike Wasserman, and from my left, Council Members Steve Glickman, Diane McNutt, and Joe Przinski. Also here with me this evening is our relatively new town manager, Greg Larson, and he has accompanying him many members of his staff. And in the audience, I see many members of our residential community and our business community, and I welcome all of you and other guests, and those of you who are watching us on television and who will be watching us on the web. So welcome to all of you. I'm going to skip to the end of my speech so you don't have any more suspense and tell you about what the state of the town is going to be like in 2008. It is going to be dynamic, exciting, it's going to have some challenges, and it's going to have some very fine projects. And as I go through what I consider the highlights of 2008, I am going to step back occasionally and put the projects in the context of town process. So, in 2008, the town of Los Gatos will be proceeding with its police facility. Many of you may already know that in 2007, the town purchased property on Los Gatos Boulevard. It is north of Blossom Hill on the east side of the road, the old Verizon building. We didn't start construction. We did ground turning in 2007. And right now the town is going through the process of getting its approvals, which means that even the chief of police of Los Gatos has gone to the Planning Commission and will soon be coming to the town council. So everybody, those of you who are out there who are homeowners who have had to do remodeling, and those of you who are developers, everybody comes through the town process, even the police department. I should say that I know that I'm going out on a limb here because I'm going to be telling you when I think the new police facility is going to be opening. But those of you who have done remodeling on your homes know that is a very slippery slope. But right now we anticipate the opening to be in the spring of 2009. Couple of things that you should know. The building here at the Civic Center for the police, that will remain, along with the one on Los Gatos Boulevard. And so I was working with staff to figure out how do I explain simply what stays here and what goes there. And so what I came up with is that if you initiate the process, i.e. chatting with the chief, picking up a report, then you come here to the Civic Center, the administration building. But if the police request you're present, interrogation, holding cell, then you go to Los Gatos Boulevard. And Greg Larson stepped in and he made it even more succinct. The police headquarters is where you go when you want to see the police. Police operation is where you go when the police wants to see you. Los Gatos 2008 will also be proceeding on the building of a new library. And I was driving around Civic Center today before this meeting, so I could get firm in my mind where the library is going to be. And the best I can describe it is it's to the back of the Civic Center, adjacent to Pageant Park. The last library, or the one that's currently here in Los Gatos, was built in the 1960s. And at that time, the town had a population of 9,000. We now have a population of 30,000. And the library, which we will be building, will be larger, but specifically it will accommodate some of our obvious needs. It will accommodate a have a larger children's reading room because the children's reading program is immensely successful and always overcrowded. It will have more facilities for computers, and it will provide for student study areas. It will be built without new taxes. And right now, where it is in the process is that we are in the process of selecting an architect. And it, too, with Peggy Conway, its director, she will be doing the same thing that the chief does, which is when the plans are finalized, the library will be coming through the town planning and town council process. Los Gatos 2008. Los Gatos 2008 will also be developing a new general plan. Now, for those of you who are not land use or government junkies, small government junkies, those of you who do not spend the first and third Mondays of every month watching us on television, or the second and fourth Wednesdays watching the Planning Commission, let me share with you. This is a general plan. This is my general plan, and you'll see I have a clip on it because I use it all the time. And you'll see it says General Plan 2000. And let me explain what it is and where we're going to be going with the general plan. I consider the general plan the most important document the town of Los Gatos has. Everything that we do must be consistent with the general plan. The general plan has their elements, but you could call them chapters such as housing, transportation, open space, conservation. And within those chapters, it has issues, goals, and policies. This general plan was prepared before 2000 and adopted in 2000, and it was adopted to cover the period of time from 2000 to 2010. It is the best practice of local government to have a new general plan every 10 years. It's not mandatory, but Los Gatos does follow that best practice. And we are now in 2008, and we are going to begin the process for a new general plan that will be covering the period from 2010 to 2020. The council, when it met last year, decided that this document still reflected the policies of our town and that we were not going to be totally rewriting it. We were instead going to be tweaking it. And to give you an example, this one covers Route 85. At that time, it was being constructed. Now it's finished. And so there needs to be modifications to bring this document up to date. But we also made a decision that we are going to amplify or add to certain sections, and those sections include the environment, youth, seniors, and recreation. And what we are going to be doing is that there will be opportunities for the public at every step of the way. We haven't identified what the exact process will be, but the public will have the opportunity to give input to the draft general plan, and after we have a proposed draft, there will be opportunities again before the Planning Commission and the Council to give public input once again. What I would suggest to you, and I know there are a number of you that I see in the audience tonight who are interested in giving your input to the general plan, we will be making information available to the public as to what the opportunities are. I would suggest that they will be in the newspaper, the town website, and Vista, which is the newspaper that the town sends out twice a year. So if you are interested in the general plan, either in giving input or listening to what's going on, please pay attention to those notices. In 2008, Los Gatos will be looking forward with 2020 vision, and I love that, looking forward with 2020 vision, and I would like to say that's mine, but it isn't, it's Greg Larson's, and so thank you, Greg. And what that refers to is a retreat that the council will be taking. Every year, the council has a retreat, and it occurs in the wintertime, about this time of year, maybe between like January and March. And it is an opportunity we have for about maybe a day, day and a half, in a setting less formal than we have here, to talk to one another about issues coming before the council, coming before the town. And it's just, as I said, it's an informal time for us to talk. But this year, it's going to be a little different. Rather than talk, we're going to have to do something that we often don't do. We're going to listen, because what we're going to have at that retreat, which at least in my experience we haven't had, is we are going to have a series of panels. The first panel will talk to us about the budget. And remember, the general plan goes between 2010 and 2020. And so the panel will be talking to us or explaining to us about their ideas of how our budget in Los Gatos will be from 2010 to 2020. We will be looking at sources of revenue, what the potential sources are, what the trade-offs are when you use various sources of revenue. We will be examining our expenses for the year 2010 to 2020. After that, we will have panels on recreation, youth, seniors, and the environment. Our panels, as I said, will be exploring their interest in that time frame from 2010 to 2020, and as I also said, looking forward with 2020 vision. Those of you who may have been present when I was selected as vice mayor or as mayor know that the issues personally important to me are our hillsides, our small town character, and our environment. And so in the year 2008, we will be taking the following steps as they relate to the environment. As I've already mentioned, the council has already decided that the general plan will expand its discussion of the environment. But in addition to that, in 2008, we will be proceeding with establishing our carbon emission baseline. We have all determined that it is critical to establish a baseline, because without that baseline, you cannot determine if you are being successful in reducing your carbon emissions. We will use that baseline. Then from there, we will establish our goals for reduction of emissions, find out the most effective way to reduce those emissions, and then to measure it. So that is one thing we will be doing. Also last year, we determined that the Community Services Commission would be the commission that would be overseeing our environmental issues. What we will be going forward with in 2008 will be a subcommittee within the Community Services Commission, and that will be composed of members from the Community Services Commission, the Planning Commission, the Parks Commission, and the Traffic Commission. And that group will become an advisory group to the council on environmental and climate control and sustainability issues. Lastly, what we will be doing in 2008 was actually in the front page of the newspaper last week, has been in the newspaper a lot, and was in the front page of the newspaper last week. And that is, there has been a significant amount of consideration being given to uniform countywide green building standards. And where the newspaper article came from last week was the request most recently came from the Home Builders Association of Northern California. And so in 2008, Los Gatos will be participating in developing regional standards and practices for countywide green building standards. I talked about we had projects, we had dynamic year coming up, we had challenges. And one of the challenges that we are facing in Los Gatos in 2008 is the budget. And before I get into what the challenge is, this is one of those issues that I want to put in context. Again, for those of you who don't spend Mondays on the TV with us, this is my copy of our budget for 2008. The way this comes about is about this time each year, our budget director, and this is Steve Conway, begins analyzing, he and his department, begin analyzing what the projected revenues will be in Los Gatos for July 1st, in this case 2008, to June 30th, 2009. And then after they project that revenue, the town then, the rest of the staff, proposes a budget or expenses that falls within the proposed revenue. That budget is then brought to the council in the spring, and at that point we have public hearings where the staff gives us information at a public hearing and where in fact the public can provide information at that public hearing. In the past 8 years, when other governments have had challenges living within their budgets, Los Gatos has done very well, and we've done very well for a couple of reasons. One, and I think mainly, is because our finance department has been very conservative in determining what our projected revenues would be. And then our staff and your council has budgeted to live within those revenues. And so we've taken a very conservative approach, and we have been successful in taking that conservative approach in living within our means. However, not everybody does. And some of the challenges we are facing this year, in 2008, is that we will have a reduction in our revenues and an increase in our expenses. As you already know, the state is projecting a $14 billion shortfall. And I know that, having read the newspaper today, that it said that I would not be able to talk about the state takeaways because the state had stated that it was not going to do any takeaways from local government. However, let me expand upon that and maybe clarify, at least from my perspective. Up until 2004, whenever the state had a shortfall, whenever they were in the red, so to speak, they took money from local government, which made it exceedingly difficult, if not impossible, for local government to balance its budget. So in 2004, you all passed Prop 1A by some 80-plus percentage points, and what that did is it made it extremely difficult for the state government to have takeaways of our local funds, making it a lot easier for us to stay on budget. It's not impossible, though, for the state to do takeaways. It's just established a process. And the first thing the state does is it must declare a fiscal emergency. Well, you actually have heard the governor use that term. But when he was in San Jose last week, he stated that in his budget proposal, there are no local government takeaways proposed. And those of us who are in local government all over the state are very thankful that the governor is proposing not to do any state takeaways. However, we do not yet have a budget from the state of California. So those of us who work in local government, we are watching Sacramento with very cautious eyes, waiting to see what happens. The organizations that represent local governments are doing the same thing. So we are hopeful that there will be no takeaways from our revenue, but we are, at this point, cautiously and carefully optimistic. We know, for example, that our gas tax revenues have been taken away for 5 months through September. That is $70,000 a month for 5 months. It's $350,000. We have been told that the money will be returned to us in September and that we will have interest. So we are mindful of state takeaways. Again, coming from the state and down to the local level, there has been legislation passed which affects our expenses. For example, we must now accrue as an expense the cost of retirement benefits, not only for employees that are retired, but those who are currently employees and who will be retired at some point in the future. So, I don't want to sound like Chicken Little. I'm not saying the sky is falling, the sky is falling. I do not feel that way. However, I do feel that we must be cautious in monitoring our revenues and our expenses. I am comfortable that yesterday we paved your streets, we cleaned up your parks, we checked out your library books, and tomorrow we will clean your streets, clean up your parks, and check out your library books. Business, Los Gatos, 2008. I said this before, but as mayor and as council people, we not only attend meetings here in town, but we go to meetings throughout the county, throughout the region, some of us even throughout the nation. And wherever I go, I have to say, people say, man, I wish our town could be like your town. And what they talk about is the vibrancy of our downtown, the fact that even though we are a small town, we have a variety of industry, a variety of businesses, and that we have generally a diverse industry. However, in the past year, last summer especially, all of us up here would be receiving emails and phone calls and letters, and there would be questions asked to, well, why are there all those empty storefronts? What are you doing about those empty storefronts? We don't understand why you're not doing more about those empty storefronts. Well, first of all, they're not empty anymore, but putting that aside, what we all must understand is that almost always when you are seeing empty storefronts, it's because a tenant has moved out, that there are other tenants negotiating with the property owner, that maybe the tenant is selling the business, and so there are negotiations between the seller of the business and the buyer of the business. Maybe the property owner is selling the property, and there are negotiations between the seller of the property and the potential buyer. Bottom line, what I'm saying is that a lot of what you see is not government controlled, but is within the private sector. Having said that, what I would like to announce tonight is a new program that is going to be instigated by your almost new town manager, Greg Larson, and your almost new mayor, Barbara Spector. And what Greg and I are going to do is we're going to be selecting 10 businesses that are important to Los Gatos. And once a month for the rest of this year, we are going to be meeting with those businesses. And our purpose and intent in meeting with these businesses is to better understand the business, to better understand their future in our town, and to understand the relationship, the future relationship between them and our town. Los Gatos 2008 will have 3 elections, one in February, one in June, and one in November. These elections will be covering many local, state, and national issues. On February 5th, you will be voting on 2 local initiatives, one concerning the town treasurer and town clerk, and the other concerning the skateboard park. Everything that I have discussed and will discuss with regard to issues facing Los Gatos in 2008 will occur and be viewed within the context of the public's decision in the 3 elections which will be occurring in 2008. Now let me step back a little bit and talk a little bit more from a personal perspective. In 2008, I am going to continue in my support of the Greenleaf Committee, which is comprised of residents and businesses from Los Gatos, Montserrano, and Saratoga. The Greenleaf Committee was jump-started by me, Aaron Garner, and Ann Walton-Smith last year when we were vice mayors of Los Gatos, Montserrano, and Saratoga, respectively. Within 1 month of the first meeting of the Greenleaf Committee, I think the first meeting was in September. Within 1 month, that group of energetic, committed individuals had a $2,500 grant from PG&E, had a website, had blogs, and had instigated a competition amongst the 3 jurisdictions to see which would convert to LED holiday lights in the greatest percentage. Right now, this group is preparing its initiatives, its projects for 2008. The group website identifies its goal as, quote, a brighter, more sustainable future, close quote. You can access the site at www.westvalleygreenleaf.com. Another group that I will be following is Los Gatos Unleashed, which was formed in 2004 and has partnered with the Humane Society of Silicon Valley to bring a dog park to downtown Los Gatos. The leader of Los Gatos Unleashed, the project leader, is Kim Daly. She and her committee are currently educating the community about the project and seeking community support. That website can be accessed at www.losgatosunleashed.org. Let me conclude by saying that the beauty and the history and the vision that is Los Gatos has always inspired its citizens. It inspires me. It inspires me as your mayor to work as hard as I can on everything that I have just discussed. But I furthermore have no doubt that in 2008, this wonderful community of those who live here and those who work here will be inspired to meet the challenges of Los Gatos and to surpass the town's expectations. Thank you. Welcome to the January 22nd, 2008 meeting of the Town of Los Gatos Joint Town Council Parking Authority Redevelopment Agency meeting. Roll call, please, Ms. Clerk.
Councilmember Steve Glickman.
Here.
Councilmember Diane McNutt.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Przynski.
Here.
Vice Mayor Mike Wasserman.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Barbara Spector.
Here. At this point in the agenda, we have a Pledge of Allegiance led by future leader. At this point, I would like Melody Rabar to come on up front, please. Tonight's future leader, Melody Rabar, is an 8th grade student at Rolling Hills Middle School. Melody has a 3.9 grade point average and is currently in a student leadership class, which allows her to participate in a lunch program 2 times a week to assist youth with disabilities. Melody is also an active athlete. She has participated in gymnastics for the past 9 years and has played on Rolling Hills soccer and basketball teams. In addition to her leadership and athletic interests, Melody pursues community service opportunities, including working at the Forest Hill Elementary School Halloween Fair and Pumpkin Walk at Marshall Lane. Let's give a round of applause for this one. All right, Melody, if you please lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Closed session report.
The council met in closed session to discuss ongoing negotiations with the Police Officers Association. Council gave direction to its negotiators, and no final reportable actions were taken.
Thank you. And appearing for Mr. Korb this evening is Attorney Sandy Sloan. Thank you. At this point, we will have commendations for outgoing board, commission, committee members. If I could have Jim Sagai and Terry Hope join me up here. Let's start with Jim. Whereas Jim Sagai has served the town of Los Gatos as a member of the town's Parks Commission from approximately June 7th, 2005 to December 31st, 2007, and whereas during this period he has unselfishly contributed his time, energies, and capabilities to the Parks Commission and community, and whereas the town council feels that such outstanding public service deserves special recognition, resolved that the Los Gatos Town Council does hereby render with genuine appreciation its gratitude and commendation to Jim Sagai for his service to the town and its citizens as a member of the Parks Commission. Now therefore, the town of Los Gatos, the town council of the town of Los Gatos does hereby render with special appreciation, commendation, and thanks to Jim Sagai for approximately 2 years of dedicated public service to the town of Los Gatos and its citizens. Thank you.
I moved to Los Gatos with my family in 1961. I worked for the Park Department for 22 years, followed by 25 years of active retirement. They were 47 years of enjoyable contact with people, working with people, and anyway, I am still going, but I'm at a point where my body joints and my mental capacities are telling me it's time to maybe consider retiring. Maybe retiring again, retiring from retirement. So I'm destined maybe sooner or later to spending time at my rocking chair, reminiscing and taking my many-colored pills. And so I want to thank everybody for this, and thank everybody that I've met and worked with for their friendship and tolerances, and I hope that continues.
Thank you. That was great. Terry, want to come on up here? For Terry Hope. Whereas Terry Hope served the town of Los Gatos as a member of the town art selection panel from January 2006 to December 2007, and whereas during this period she unselfishly contributed her time, energies, and capabilities to the town art selection panel, and whereas the town council feels that such outstanding public service deserves special recognition. Now, therefore, the town council of the town of Los Gatos does hereby render with special appreciation, commendation, and thanks to Terry Hope for her dedicated public service to the town of Los Gatos and its citizens.
Thank you, and thank the council for this nice recognition. And it's always such an honor and pleasure to give service to the community, especially in my favorite areas of the music and arts. Thank you.
Unable to be here this evening are the following individuals who will also be getting plaques of commendation: Louise Kirkbride, Aaron Green, Salvador Leonardi, Barry Waite, and Curtis Campbell. In their absence, may we have a clap of recognition. Before I move on into the consent calendar, I would ask anyone who has not already done so, and if you intend to speak on anything, please submit one of these speaker cards to one of the two clerks over to my left. All right, at this point in our agenda, we are at the consent items, which will be acted upon by a single motion. Before the Town Council Redevelopment Agency acts on the consent calendar, any member of the public or Town Council agency may request that any item be removed from the consent calendar Consent items will be considered at the discretion of the mayor or chair. And before I look to the council, the record should reflect that item 10 has been pulled. And the record should show that it will be heard after other business. Does any member of the council wish to remove anything from the consent calendar? Mr. Whitman.
Madam Mayor, I would like to ask a question about one of the items. I don't think it needs to be pulled.
Which item?
That would be number 4.
All right, item number 4, EPW job number 0460, Balzer Field restroom remodel and expansion. And you have a question of that?
I do.
All right, hopefully it'll be brief. Go ahead.
I will make it very brief. I was reading the report. This is the remodeling of the bathroom next to Balzer Field. I believe it was for $144,000 and some change. Was that just for the bathroom, or did that include also the snack shack for the Little League?
Mayor, members of the council, in response to Councilman Glickman's question, the remodel and expansion of the facility was for the entire facility. The bathrooms were dramatically expanded with nearly a doubling of space to accommodate increased bathrooms. There is a very slight increase of space for the storage area, and there is no change to the dimensions of the snack shack. However, there was a re-roofing for the whole building.
Madam Mayor, thank you very much. That answers my question.
Thank you. Anybody from the council want to remove anything from the consent calendar? Other than the item that we've already had removed, has anybody from the audience wished to remove anything from the consent calendar? Seeing no one, do I have a motion?
I move to accept the consent calendar with the exception of item 10.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Glickman, seconded by Mr. Przinski, to approve the consent calendar except for 10. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, at this point, we are at verbal communications, which is up to 3 minutes, may be allotted to each speaker to address matters that are not on tonight's agenda. This is items that are not on tonight's agenda. I do have cards. If you intend to speak on this item, please submit cards.
I got lights like that, too. You gotta pull them in once in a while.
All right, has everybody submitted a card? I'm trying to determine how much time to give each person before I can make that determination. I need to know how many people are speaking. Do we have any more cards? All right, given the number of cards that we have, I will give each speaker 2 minutes. 2 minutes. All right, we will start with Michael Silva. Mr. Silva?
Good evening, Michael Silva, 675 North Santa Cruz Avenue, the Ivy House. I want to speak about the skate park. I've written letters to the Times Observer. They've got a viewpoint thing there online, which, by the way, that engine is very hard to use. Kind of frustrating. About the skate park. In theory, I think that the skate park is something that the youth in this town could use. However, I've seen absolutely nothing to show responsibility on how it's going to be run, how it's going to be maintained, who's going to pay for it, and how that thing's going to happen. It seems to me that everything that I've seen so far is that we want it and we should have it and we don't have to do anything about it. It's been said by many different people. I'm sorry? Yeah. It's been said by many people that there's guidelines, there's an outline, there's a business plan, there's things like that on how this is going to run. I've seen absolutely nothing like that whatsoever. I can't endorse something that I don't know how it's going to happen. There isn't another youth organization in town with sports or activities of that kind of such that is funded by the town and the citizens without them being self-supporting. This is something that, yes, okay, it's a good opportunity, it'd be great for the kids, but who's going to pay for it? I'm not going to pay for it. And then to go on, we have this terrible thing that's happening on, your public rights to say what you think and how you display that, to even having a sign on my yard that I said, I don't want this, I say no, because, like I've just stated, and have somebody come over within 2 or 3 hours and rip it off my lawn, my property, my place that I live, rip it off and throw it in the bushes. Bad behavior.
Yes, Madam Mayor. After your wonderful State of the Town speech, I'm disappointed you cut back on the time we get to talk. That's the antithesis of American democracy. I know you understand that, so I'd ask you to think about that. Okay? I want to speak to the issue of what has happened in our fair community. In the town clerk's office, we had certain personnel who violated the law, all right, who allowed duplication and copies of the petitioning activity, some 2,000 valid signatures, that was passed out to the opposition. And of course that's illegal, it's a misdemeanor, and so we're looking to the DA for the culmination of her people's investigation. We're waiting to see some justice done because our American democracy was raped in the basis. The ugliness of what happens in the town clerk's office stands foremost. And we want to see, we being the people who support D, want to see the outcome of the investigation of these culpable people. Is there more than one? Was there a group scheming, malice aforethought? That's the huge question. Or what was it? Okay? So where and when, Madam DA, do we hear from your office? Okay? Secondly, the yes on D, you have to cut through all the nonsense that the opposition has put up, okay? It's unbelievable, the misinformation and disinformation put out by the opposition. And I'm going to cut through to it and say one thing, okay? It's cheap, we can afford it, and the kids deserve it. The streets are for cars, not for kids.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Thank you.
Joe Carroll.
Good evening. What has happened with Vasona? More specifically, what has happened to the town's 24.5% ownership of the land in Vasona? Does it seem ironic to any of you that in the next few weeks our town will vote on a new skateboard park, a skateboard park that takes up roughly 3/4 of an acre? Everyone in town is talking about this project. This project has taken 7+ years, and yet nobody, not one of you, is willing to have a public discussion about our land, 13.5 acres in Vasona. This is crazy. Here, the town owns land that is 20 times the size of the skateboard park, and yet no one is willing to support a public discussion. No one is, I don't honestly know what this council thinks we should do with this land. I don't know. I don't know why this town is so, or this council is so secretive about this property. Would this council ever hire a novice to re-engineer the town's sewer system? I don't think so. Would we hire an 8th grader to finalize the annual budget? No. We have 2 guys that have been charged to go and do this work. We need to arm them with everything possible, the best negotiators, the best. We have incredible people in this community. We need to give these guys, Joe and Mike, the opportunity to work with people that have done numerous land transactions to take on the county and let the county understand that we own this property. I can't believe we're not doing that, and I don't know why. What are the findings of the Parks and Recreation audit that this council commissioned 7 months ago? I'll tell you where they are. We have no Park and Recreation Department in Los Gatos. We have no long-term planning, and unfortunately, in these current negotiations, or non-negotiations as I see it, with the county, it is really starting to show. I don't want to be just negative up here. I know I sound very negative, but you have incredible people in this community. You have Mr. Sobrato, a billionaire, who has offered to help us procure land. Why are we not doing it?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dennis Byron?
Thank you. I'm Dennis Byron. I live at 455 San Benito. As you know, I'm a supporter of Measure A on the ballot. There's been atrocities presented on both sides. D. Sorry, I screwed up. Measure D. There's atrocities on both sides, as you know. The signs have been stolen. There's been misrepresentation. But the main thing is the kids. This measure is for the kids. And unfortunately, I've said this before, but this town is not kid-friendly. It needs to be. And Measure D will start that process. To this point, the only thing I can find in the budget is a $12,000 item to support the venue. We do not support the kids in this town, and it's about time we start. And we start with Measure D. Thank you.
Thank you. Dick Conrad?
As a member of the Los Gatos Parks and Trails Commission, I participated in the site selection process for the skateboard park. A skateboard park committee was formed. The town provided generous initial funding plus the site. The kids were asked what they wanted, and as you would expect, picked the Taj Mahal of skateboard parks. The skateboard park committee said that they would raise the remaining funds through donations, and at the same time, an alternate proposal which could have been quickly implemented using modular ramps was turned down. Now we find ourselves 3 to 4 years later with the Skateboard Park Committee having produced a huge failure in fundraising, and Measure D, which asked the rest of us to bail them out after they failed to meet their commitment to the kids. I don't know what all this about the kids is about. I meet with Little League, I meet with the soccer people, and we are a kid-friendly community. We elect you people up there to make the allocations of the resources in this community, and I've lived here for 25 years, and you do a damn good job. And we don't need a bunch of ballot initiatives like exist in the state of California, which screws up everything, including the funding, in this community. You're our neighbors. We elected you. We want you to do the resource allocation. We don't want a bunch of people getting bailed out through measures on the ballot initiative. Now, I support us, strangely as you might think, I support the skateboard park. I've supported the skateboard park with some of my own time and effort. But I think it would result in chaos in this community because there's a lot of projects that would come through on ballot initiatives, and I don't need paid solicitors costing me at the grocery store. There's a way out. Let's go back to the defeat Module D. Let's go back to the ramps that are lower cost, and let's get our kids skating.
Thank you, Mr. Conrad. Karen DeLumi?
Hi. Excuse me. I just want to address a few points that have come up and help give some facts. First of all, I'm with the skate park. I'm the chairwoman. We have raised $300K in donations and pledges. If you want more information, please feel free to contact me on any of the things I'll point out. I have 3 data points that show that the park can be built for $50 a square foot. That would bring the park cost for a standard skate park. It is not a fancy, this is pretty standard of the skate parks that are being built. Brings it to about 600 to 700K. If you minus the 300K we've already raised, it brings it way down on the cost to the town. The 50K, this is something that when the land was allocated for the park, quite a few of the current council members okayed it. Mr. Wasserman, I remember you specifically saying, okay, let's put approximately 50K in a future budget to cover it. And the 50K amount had to do with if it was going to be manned. Parks are run for much less, $12,000 approximately is what Sunnyvale is. The kids can broom it themselves. If times got bad, we'll round up volunteers to cut bushes, whatever's there. When it comes to modular, they're actually more expensive and more dangerous because screws pop up and there's more maintenance over time. So cement is the least maintenance solution. Let's see. It's more like a playground. It's not an organized sport, so comparing it and actually pitting baseball and other sports against the skate park is really not a fair analogy. If you want more information, I can give you more details on that. And I think I've hit the main points. Thank you.
Thank you. Trish O'Hara.
Hi, my name is Trish O'Hara. I have a house at 36 Oak Grove, and I bought that house from, it was my parents' house. I bought it about 16 years ago. Currently, I live in it part-time, like right now, and the rest of the time I live in Alaska. However, in 2 years, it is going to be our retirement home, and my husband, who's not here, asked me to speak tonight concerning the issue of taxes. I don't have all the information on the skate park. I will tell you that anytime a municipality takes on a project like this, number one, it always costs more than you estimate, and number two, the maintenance costs accelerate over time. And with the current budget situation in California, we are concerned that it will compete with other basic services the city provides, such as excellent schools, which I support, even though I only have one kid left in high school. He'll be gone by the time I come down here. But we are very concerned about our property taxes. We feel that part of the value of this community is in the excellent schools and in the excellent community programs. And I think down the road, you will see a project like this competing with programs already in place. It is inevitable. It will. I was on a school board for 12 years. I've seen this happen. It sounds like a good idea. It may be a good idea. And nobody is opposed to kids. I had 4 of them. And I support kids in every way. I have never voted against a school bond issue, even when my own kids are out of school. But I really am concerned about property taxes. I will also say I have family here who are retired and on limited incomes who can't afford any increases whatsoever, even though they don't pay a huge amount. Any increase would be detrimental to them. So I think you have to consider the future of the maintenance costs and how is this project going to compete with existing services and what I would consider much more basic needs, such as schools, roads, community parks. Anyway, thank you. My concern is property taxes. I don't want to see them increased, and to me, this might cause that to happen.
Thank you, Ms. O'Hara. We have next Michelle Nelson.
My name is Michelle Nelson. My husband Randall and I live at 104 Hepplewhite Court. We both lived in Las Gatas since the mid-'60s, and I will testify that this is a very kid-friendly town. We have both, my husband's recovering from laryngitis, so I'm the speaker. We have both spoken to both sides of the Measure D initiative, and the facts in Measure D are as follows. A small vocal group of people in town wanted a skateboard park. They asked the town for support. The town offered them a piece of property worth $1 million. The skate park committee agreed to raise the money to build the skate park facility. In 4 years, the skateboarders have not raised enough money to do what they want, and now the small group of skateboarders wants the town, that means you and I, to give them an additional $1 million to build the facility and $50,000 each year forever to maintain it. The skateboarders don't mention that the town is going to have to pay attorneys to defend the town, that's you and I, every time a child gets hurt at the park and sues the town. Other recreational facilities for soccer and Little League are self-funded and do not use tax dollars in their programs. Let's see, $1 million piece of land, another $1 million to build the facility, $50,000 every year for an untold tens of thousands of dollars a year to defend the town in lawsuits. The facts are clear. This is a really bad use of my hard-earned tax dollars. We are voting no on D, and we urge those of you listening at home to do the same. Don't waste my tax dollars and sign a blank check. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Calderwood?
Oh, I'm sorry, who do you call?
Tom Calderwood?
Sorry, it's my brother. Hi, Tom Calderwood, Mary Alice Drive in Los Gatos. On the skate park committee, during the Christmas break, I interviewed, went at the other communities in Northern California that have skate parks, contacted 40 of them. I contacted 40 communities in Northern California. About 20 of those responded back, and some interesting data, I think, comes back from that. In all cases, the majority of the funding came from public funds. In only one case did the skate park cost more than $1 million. Only one site did they have on-site supervision. It was only in the case where you have on-site supervision where the cost is about $42,000. All the other parks, there was no on-site. They'd have people, they either had a video camera or they had people drive by, either park staff or police staff. And from their standpoint, it was either no cost or to about $14,000 a year. So the $50,000 a year is a max cap for fiscal responsibility. It's not what's really going to be spent unless somebody feels that we need to have on-site supervision. Other communities don't do it, though. I think the key point, though, is I asked them all, was it a good addition to the community? Every one of them said it was a great addition to the community. I think the issue about fairness, that the opponents say that it's not fair for us to take the money. I look at those interests that had baseball fields built, libraries, tennis courts, playgrounds, the land. Did those groups buy the land and put the initial facilities in place with their own money? No, I think a lot of that funding for those parks, tennis courts, libraries, came from the town. They invested in the community. So I think we should be looking at that as, is it fair that skateboarders are the only interest that doesn't have anything? That's all.
Thank you. I may have the last name wrong, but Elizabeth Viaz? VEA? ZIE. Thank you.
It's Elizabeth Veazey. Thank you. I wanted to address a few issues that were brought up this evening, and that would be raising taxes. So many people are concerned that it's going to raise our taxes, and we all know that it will not. This piece of property, as we know, qualifies as a blighted area under the RDA fund, which would be able to, for parks and recreation. We also know that the $50K is capped, and it will not cost $50,000 to maintain this property. Another thing is, one of the speakers just spoke about the town would have to protect themselves from lawsuits. We all know that there is a California law that protects any town or city that puts in a skate park for that very reason. And many of these parks that are built in California do not even have fences around them. So the towns and cities are not liable for any damage or harm that someone may have. Last but least, I wanted to bring up that, yes, we do have wonderful schools here, and that's why many of us have moved here, so that our kids can have a wonderful education. And these are the kids that are skateboarding to, like my son, Little League games or practice. These kids are the ones that are doing good grades, and these are why people are flocking to Los Gatos. Our kids deserve this. My kids are getting good grades. So thank you.
Thank you. Paul Dubois?
Mayor Spector, all the other former mayors, I'm here to talk about not skateboard parks, but health and safety issues in West Los Gatos. I am Paul Dubois from West Los Gatos. Specifically, I want to talk about two issues that have been hanging around for a couple of years. First one is Wedgwood and Pollard, known as Cali Margarita Project. It went out of business or defunct about a year and a half ago, maybe a little more than that. It's sitting there. It is nothing but a piece of wood. I call it the Wedgwood wood pile. It is a townhome unit that has not been completed. Right now, it is an attractive nuisance. I've given you some pictures showing graffiti on it. During the summertime, I believe it to be a fire hazard, as it is nothing but sticks and kindling. It's possibly a health hazard. I read in the paper today there's standing water in there, so we'd have mosquito abatement problems. There's also potentially vector control issues there, and our building code allows for the town to take action. I would not hesitate to say that, by the way, there's also, if you notice the black on there, I believe that to be mold. That's from my untrained eyes. I would not hesitate to say that if this same thing were in the downtown issue, this would not have hung around for a year and a half, almost 2 years. This issue would have been taken care of. Crosswalk, Pollard and Abbott. This is another issue that's been hanging around for a couple of years. Originally, according to staff, they talked to the town of Campbell because there's a park in Campbell, which the residents from Los Gatos cross Pollard Avenue to go to this park. I see mothers out there pushing strollers and taking their little children across there. There is no crosswalk to protect them. Apparently, the city of Campbell has not done anything to move forward. I am urging the town of Los Gatos to please get a crosswalk in there. Staff tells me it is in the 08 capital improvement budget. I'd like to request for the residents of West Los Gatos that it stay in the capital improvement budget for this next year. I'm going to skip the third issue because of time. I'm on a 2-minute time issue here and say, listen, folks, you're all elected at large. You represent all of Los Gatos. I believe that if the folks who are the policymakers in town have established policy that represents all the citizens everywhere in Los Gatos, not just the downtown area, that staff will follow too, and we'll see issues such as health and safety be taken care of in a timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Does staff wish to address either the Calle Margarita or Pollard Crosswalk issue?
Sure, Madam Mayor, members of the council, a quick staff response on those two issues. First, the Community Development Department has been working on the abandoned construction project. Over the last year and a half, it's gone through multiple property ownership changes, and we are prepared and in discussions with the city attorney's office to step up the enforcement action up to and including an order to demolish over the next 2 months. So we will be working towards that as our ultimate step to cure the abandoned construction project with multiple property owner changes. And then second, as Mr. Dubois mentioned, the crosswalk has been looked at in prior CIPs, capital improvement projects. It will be looked at again this year, and we will try to re-engage again with the City of Campbell about their joint cooperation and partnership in proceeding with that crosswalk, at least in a supportive fashion as part of a budget decision this spring.
Thank you. All right. Next card, Rick DiNapoli.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I read with great regret the experience of Councilman Glickman's house the other night. That type of activity really has no place within any type of reasonable public discourse. I will say, however, Councilman Glickman, that you've joined a wide range of your fellow citizens who've also experienced similar activities on their properties. You've heard about Mr. Silva, myself included, and a number of other people who are in here tonight have had their property vandalized, have been trespassed upon, signs taken. The report today said there was 55. That number is approaching 100. We were able to locate 3 of them at the bottom of the creek at Los Gatos Creek, where they were deposited there. This type of thing has really got to stop. It's pretty ridiculous that we cannot have a reasonable discourse without worrying about whether or not our property is going to be vandalized. We who oppose Measure D ask that we've instructed all of our people not to touch any Yes on D signs, and I trust that the Yes on D people have done the same. We'd just like to see it followed through. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Timothy Silver.
Hi, I'm here just to give you a little insight. I'm from a neighboring town of Gilroy. We do have a skate park. Now, when it was first built, it was designed just for skateboarders. They did fence it, but they didn't lock it. But kids are kids, and bicycles were in the park. So then the police department tried to control this. Well, kids have cell phones. They'd know when the cops were coming. They would tell their friends. The friends would go away. Squad cars trying to chase bicycles really isn't a good thing. So they went to odd and even days. But the problem is the park was designed for skateboards, not bicycles. So if you think you're going to keep it safe for all, you better build a skateboard and a bicycle park. That's my suggestion. Also, site selection is very important. There has been some parallelizations in Gilroy. Parents are up in arms as far as safety goes in the park, how it was designed, why this was this way. And most of the injuries are from the bicycles. Now, all I'm going to try to say here is that you want easy access for medical and emergency vehicles. Gilroy has a 4-lane intersection right there, so they can life flight right away, 100 yards away from the park, boom. That's all I really want to tell you, is to be careful and really pay attention to where you're going to put this and how close you will be to medical facilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jonathan Knowles.
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Knowles, and I live here in Los Gatos. 28 years ago, at the height of popularity in skateboarding, I was one of the managers of the Upland Pipeline Skate Park, one of the most important skateboard parks in the history of this activity. Every skateboarder knows about this historic skateboard park. I'm a supporter of responsible skateboarding. Skateboarding is a fine activity. Measure D has nothing to do with whether or not skateboarding is good or bad. Regardless of what we keep hearing, Measure D has nothing to do about the kids. Let me say that again. Measure D has nothing to do about the kids. Measure D is extreme and irresponsible, and it will be costly to our community. Here are the facts. Measure D is vague and poorly written. It will take $2 million in cash and land from the pockets of Los Gatos residents next year. Measure D guarantees that we, the residents of Los Gatos, will surrender at least an additional $50,000 per year in perpetuity in maintenance fees alone. Measure D commits us to funding a skateboard park in perpetuity that will be used by a minuscule number of users at the expense of other critical town services such as public safety, senior services, and our parks. Measure D will have additional negative effects on the residents of our town. It'll build a skateboard facility on a parking lot next to our local Little League ballpark. This is one of the few free, no-time limit downtown parking lots remaining in Los Gatos. In a year where our state is anticipating a $14 billion budget deficit, which will mean challenging times for communities such as ours, can we really afford to spend $1 million on the design and construction of a skateboard park, something that will be used by so very, very few from our town? Simply put, Measure D is not about politics or personalities. Measure D is not about the kids. I'll say it again and again. It takes away from important town services and facilities, and it does so at a great cost to the residents, both adults and kids, of the community of Los Gatos. Please, I urge you, vote responsibly and vote no on Measure D. Thank you.
Christine Curry. My light wasn't on here.
Good evening, Council. My name is Christine Curry. I'm a mom. You've heard from me many, many times. And I just want to remind everyone, I know there's a lot of you on the fence. I have this discussion in my own household because I have 2 skateboarding sons. But I thought it might be interesting for those of you on the fence to go to our website. It is www.downonmeasured.org. And there you will find a lot of people you recognize. There's going to be letters from people in our community, leaders. Terry Hope, our fine council members here have written a fine letter. So I think it's, for those of you who haven't placed your absentee ballot take a look. If you're on the fence, take a look. It's really, it's time well spent, especially there's a space that I found most interesting. I guess maybe because I created it, but because it talks about public fundraising. It talks about other towns who have these specific problems, and specific meaning who's going to pay for it, where does the money come, you know, who handles what. And in the little bit of research I did, it was an eye-opening experience. So I'm just asking you all to vote no on D, but don't listen to me. Go to the website. Again, the URL is www.downonmeasurед.org, and I know we also have something there that says you can get signs, but unfortunately they've all been stolen. So, and then the only other thing I wanted to share with you, which was really a disturbing story, was that a neighbor of mine today said, I still have my sign, which is really exciting, and it's the one that you brought back, like, for the third time. But today, there were kids out there BB practicing with a BB gun. So I didn't think that could happen in my little community of beautiful Los Gatos, but I guess this has really been an unfortunate, divisive thing over money. But just remember, vote no. Thanks.
Thank you. I have no other cards. All right. I'm going to, Mr. Davis has been told to keep the sign down at shoulder level, and he agreed that he would, so that we could have signs in the audience, which is his First Amendment right, which will not disturb the rest of our ability to conduct this meeting. All right. Seeing no more cards, we are now going to public hearings. Number 14, which is... And I'll say this slowly, since those of you who are not here for weed abatement will be able to leave the facility. All right, agenda item 14, adopt resolution ordering abatement of hazardous vegetation, weeds. Staff has made me aware that we have a representative, Mr. Kumra, I think, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, from the County of Santa Clara. Does staff have something they want to add to the report?
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council. County of Santa Clara Agriculture Commission, in coordination with the town of Los Gatos for over the past 25 years, has an annual hazardous vegetation weed abatement program. This program is run by the county, again, in coordination with the town of Los Gatos. As a part of this annual process and program, in November 19, 2007, Town Council passed a resolution declaring hazardous vegetation as a public nuisance, and set this evening as a public hearing for this matter. Notices was sent by the County Agriculture Commission back in December of 2007, and as of this evening, we have neither the town nor the county has not received any letter comments pertaining to this matter. As the mayor mentioned, Mr. Milton Cumbre from the County Agriculture Commission, which is the project manager for this program, is here in case if there are any questions. This concludes my report, if there are any questions.
Thank you. Questions of staff? Mr. Glickman.
Thank you very much. I anticipate the council will be in support of this, as we have every year that it's been brought to us. So my question is there some state law that requires us to go through this public hearing process on a matter which the nature has not changed, and I think that the council remains entirely supportive of, and it's not that we don't want to give people the right to a public hearing, but we do this every year. Is it a legal requirement?
Councilmember Glickman, I believe there is a health and safety code within the state law that requires this process to be followed each year.
All right, thank you.
Other questions of staff? All right, I don't have any cards on this. Mr. Cumbre, or does anyone in the public wish to address us on this issue? All right, seeing no one, I will just open and close the public hearing and turn to to council for a motion. Mr. Glickman.
Thank you. I will, as I annually do, move the adoption of the resolution ordering abatement of hazardous vegetation weeds, and that would be the resolution included in our packet. I don't think I need to read the title.
Second. Seconded by Ms. McNutt. Discussion? Seeing, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, agenda item 15, adopt resolution authorizing the continued use of supplemental local law enforcement services funds, SLESF, to provide funding for 2 full-time police officers assigned as motorcycle traffic officers. Staff report on that?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Scott Seaman, Police Chief. Just a very brief staff report that this is a regular piece of business for the police department, acting to accept $100,000, which comes by state mandate or state legislative act to the town each year. It's for frontline law enforcement, not to go to regular law enforcement, to go to supplemental activities, and we have designated that the money go to our motorcycle services, which are above and beyond our patrol services. Montessorino shares this funding with us. We get $1,000 or $100,000, and they get that as well, and they have passed their act previously. This will complete the town's requirements.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the public wishing to address us on this issue? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and look to council for a motion. Mr. Brzezinski.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move to adopt a resolution authorizing the continued use of the supplemental local law enforcement services funds to provide funding for 2 full-time police officers assigned to motorcycle.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Mr. Brzezinski, seconded by Mr. Wasserman. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, agenda item 16. Consider a request for approval and introduction of a planned development ordinance to renovate an existing motel, Los Gatos Motor Inn, convert a portion of the hotel to office, and to construct new commercial building on property zone CH. No significant environmental impacts have been identified as a result of this project, and a mitigated negative declaration is recommended. APN 52923-007, Plan Development Application PDO 701, Negative Declaration NDO 702, Property Location 55 Los Gatos, Saratoga Road, Property Owner Applicant 55 Partners, LLC. Do we have a staff report? Of course.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe this item will go as quickly as the other two. The project site is located on the northeast corner of Alberto Way and Los Gatos Saratoga Road. The existing Los Gatos Motor Inn has been in operation since the 1960s. Let's see if we can. The project includes several aspects of it, including renovation of the motel and the grounds, conversion of 2,300 square feet of the existing motel to office space, construction of a 9,000 square foot commercial building, including a restaurant and retail uses. The lobby will be relocated to the center of the motel building. 3 rooms will be eliminated, and a total of 77 on-site parking spaces are proposed under a shared parking plan. The applicant is meeting all of the CH zoning requirements with the exception of a reduced front and side setback for the new building. The 77 on-site parking spaces will be shared. The proposed monument sign is taller than allowed by the sign ordinance, and the applicant is requesting a waiver of the underground utility requirement for a portion of new power lines that are required to serve this site. The PD was considered by the Planning Commission on December 12th and November 14th, September 12th and November 14th of 2007. The Commission forwarded a recommendation of denial. Staff has identified 8 remaining issues. Each has been identified in the draft plan development ordinance, which you have a copy of. The issues include setbacks, landscaping, architectural issues. The corner tower element is prominent of those. The ground sign, parking, master conditional use permit, community benefit, and the new transformer that's required to serve the site. In terms of the setback, the project is 7 feet lower in elevation than Los Gatos Saratoga Road. And the applicant has pushed the new commercial building to the front and side property lines in an attempt to create visibility from the street frontages. The code requires a 15-foot setback from both property lines. The large landscape area along Los Gatos Saratoga Road provides good separation from the street on the south side. However, staff recommends that the setback on the Alberto Way side be increased to provide a more adequate landscape buffer between the sidewalk and the new building. This is consistent with the setbacks required for other similar commercial projects and is reduced in depth as appropriate, since this project serves as a gateway to not only the town but also to the Alberto Way neighborhood. The existing building has about a 10-foot setback or 15 feet from the sidewalk. So the proposed building would be similar to, as recommended, to the existing building. The Planning Commission also directed that the applicant provide more landscaping along the street frontages. The revised landscape plans show an enhanced landscape plan. The tower element was reduced from 35 to 29 feet based on direction from the Planning Commission and upon recommendation of staff. The Commission subsequently indicated a preference to have the tower element eliminated. Staff recommends the reduced tower element design as shown on the revised plans. This is a gateway entry project to the town and the neighborhood, and staff wants to ensure architectural excellence is provided in this project. In terms of the sign that's proposed, there's an existing pole sign for the motel that's located on the corner of Los Gatos Saratoga Road and Alberto Way. The proposed freestanding sign is 15 feet high and is not consistent with other similar sign approvals that have occurred over the past 5 years. The applicant is also proposing 6 tenant names on the monument sign. The commercial design guidelines includes a provision that the display of up to 3 tenants may be considered for small ground signs, provided the background is consistent and the type, style, and logo colors are the same. Staff does not consider this to be a small ground sign and recommends that the multiple tenants not be allowed. It would certainly be appropriate that the motel sign, that the motel name be affixed to the ground sign. Staff determined that the 15-foot high proposed sign is excessive and should be reduced to 10 feet. The commercial design guidelines point out that 7 feet is appropriate. So we recognize that the depressed elevation of the site should be considered in terms of the height of the ground sign, and that's why staff is recommending a 10-foot high ground sign. The desk item, condition number 14 that's been provided, requires the sign height to be reduced, but also requires the removal of the pole sign, just to be clear. In terms of the shared parking concept, we've looked at that at length. A parking study was completed by the town's consulting traffic engineer. Traffic engineer considered similar projects with similar types of uses. The conclusion of the study is that 77 spaces are adequate to support the proposed uses. The consultant is in attendance in the council chambers if the council has questions about either the parking study or the traffic analysis. The master conditional use permit will address any potential use or parking conflicts. As previously mentioned, there will be a master conditional use permit that will be developed once more information is provided about the tenants that may occupy the building, and that master conditional use permit will be reviewed by the Planning Commission. In terms of community benefit, according to the applicant, the community benefit offering includes the following: retention and growth of a revenue stream to the town, diversity in local tourism, provision of a sustainable retail connection, creation of a new commercial retail site, community-sensitive design and architecture, an upgrade of an existing motel and improvement to the appearance of the site, and a $5,000 contribution towards traffic calming on Alberta Way or the Alberta Way neighborhood. The council should discuss whether the community benefits that are offered are sufficient to satisfy the town's community benefit policy. Based on other projects that generate similar amounts of traffic, staff believes the proposed community benefit offerings should be further augmented. One suggestion is to increase the traffic calming contribution. In terms of the new transformer, the applicant will be installing a new transformer to allow power to the site to be upgraded. That item is discussed at length in the staff report, and the location of the new transformer and how it will be screened will be determined during the architecture and site review process. In terms of conclusion, the council should discuss the following: building size and setbacks, monument sign, whether the corner tower element should be eliminated, and the level of community benefit being provided. This concludes staff's report.
Questions of staff? Okay, Mr. Glickman.
Thank you very much. In reading the discussion and testimony of both planning commission hearings on this project, there was opinion expressed on both sides about the advantage, appropriateness, wisdom of increasing retail opportunity or infrastructure presence at that particular location. I respect Mr. Lortz's input. I would also hope to hear from our economic development folks so that we can get some objective input from the staff on what the reality is there, having heard from both sides and somewhat conflicting input.
Hi. Does this work? Can you hear me? Councilmember Glickman, could you please restate that question for me?
Well, during the Planning Commission hearings, there was testimony from both sides about whether it was or wasn't appropriate or advantageous to the town to have additional retail at that site. There is not much there now. So I was just hoping to get some, what I always consider objective input from our staff so we can appropriately consider that.
Certainly. From an economic vitality standpoint, we do see spin-off benefits from a retail use going onto the site by providing a walkable neighborhood alternative for both residents to shop and patron the services there, the commercial uses which are already in existence, the office parks, and the lodge. So we're really seeing, from an economic development perspective, activity to the site that is walkable and would be beneficial to both residents, visitors, and the commercial uses.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I have two questions of Mr. Lortz, if I may. Mr. Lortz, I know you said this, but I just want to review it one more time to make sure that I'm clear and everyone else is clear. On the setbacks, the applicant is proposing 5 feet, and staff is recommending an additional 10, and that would then line it up with the existing building. Is that what I heard you say?
That's correct.
Okay. And then my second question is regarding the sign. Is staff recommending that this center have a name? I know they've proposed a name. I couldn't remember if that was something that we had discussed in the commercial design guidelines, that as soon as you gather 2 or 3 shops together, that they think they have to have a name of a center. Is that a staff proposal, or is that something the applicant came up with on their own?
No, that is an approach that's used typically on multi-tenant centers. You can call it the name of one of the businesses in there, like the Nob Hill Center, for example. So this could be whatever the motel's in, the Motor Inn Center. And as we mentioned in the staff report, there is a provision in the commercial design guidelines for small multi-tenant centers to list up to 3 names. Typically, that's done with office uses, where you might mention the 3 most prominent tenants in the building, but that's a very small center. Our feeling is that this is a larger center. It's a very significant gateway to the town, and that's why we were being very conservative in our recommendation.
Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Lortz, I've always found this piece of property intriguing because it's down below the level of the street. It reminds me a little of Linden Plaza and the spaces they have down below. I've visited the site and I've met with the applicants. To the issue of the height of the sign, proposed sign, the 7 feet, the 10 feet, if it's 15 feet proposed, staff recommendation to be at least 10. Given 10 from the ground level, what is the exposure above the road level?
Well, coming from the west, traveling to the east, it would be 10 feet tall because, you're looking at it pretty much at grade as you go along Highway 9, and Alberta Way is pretty much at grade there. So looking at it from...
So, excuse me, the base of the sign would be at grade?
Yes.
At Alberta and Highway 9?
Yes, and then it would move up to 10 feet. And then if you're traveling west on Highway 9, you're diving down, and I was looking at that a lot today, and that's very much screened by existing trees. And the thing that is interesting to me is sometimes prospective business owners think the taller the better, but what happens is it gets the sign actually up into the trees, and then of course we get a tree removal request. What our approach has been to try to lower the sign so that you actually see it underneath the trees rather than try to get it up into the trees. So that's the reason that we kind of balance between 15 feet that's proposed, 7 feet is what the code says, and we're recommending 10 feet.
May I just follow?
You may.
Thank you. And your proposal of 10 feet is because of the location of the base as compared to being on a level road. You're proposing a few feet more than normal.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Brzezinski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I noticed, Mr. Lortz, that in the ordinance language, you've accommodated all of the recommendations made by staff and from the Planning Commission. One of the recommendations was to move the setback along Alberta Way back 10 feet, and as a result, that would reduce the size of the structure from 9,000 to 8,000 square feet. I noticed that in Section 2, Number 1, that it still reflects construction of a 9,000 square foot commercial building, when I believe if we use the recommendation of the 10-foot setback, that reduction should be reflected in this for consistency.
There's 2 ways to go on that, and you are absolutely correct in all of the things that you said there. In terms of the size of the center, the issue for the applicant is they had been requesting the size of the retail space of 9,000 square feet. What the PD does is it says of a 9,000 square foot commercial building, but then they also have to comply with the parking requirement. What we have concluded, now the applicant may have some magic way to make this all work at 9,000 square feet, but what we've concluded is if you move the building line over, as you mentioned, then it does make the building smaller because you can't provide enough parking spaces. That's the magic part of that. So if the council chooses to go ahead and reduce that down accordingly, certainly feel free to do so.
All right, so the inclusion of the 9,000 square feet, it accommodates the issue of the 10-foot setback addition, but we could change that to a number that best fits, given your estimates. And the assumption is that the staff has determined there really isn't a possibility of maintaining the parking component if we were to try to gain that extra 1,000 square foot.
That has been our conclusion.
Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Glickman.
Thank you. First of all, let me also mention that I visited the site and met with the applicants. Two questions, Mr. Woods. First, on the question of the sign, people will be coming to this facility. I believe this is a motel. It's out-of-town visitors come. Probably from the two exits on Route 17, and maybe some from the town directly along Route 9, but I would imagine that people making their initial visit would be coming off those two exits of 17 and looking for the place. Will the sign at the height that you proposed be visible from at least one, if not both of those exits? That's my first question.
Well, it would definitely be very visible from the one exit as you're getting off the East Los Gatos exit. It will be extremely visible. The other exit, of course, you're going to be on the other side of 17, so it would not be visible. And what we've been working with the applicant on is trying to develop outreach programs with either Villa Montalvo, Mountain Winery, some of our restaurants, to broaden their base of advertising.
Okay. Second question follows on the point that Councilmember Brzezinski raised. As he correctly pointed out, the staff is recommending a more, if I may use the word, standard setback, and it was his concern that if we impose that condition and also impose the standard parking requirements, that there would not, in fact, then be room for the 9,000 square foot structure. And then I think you had said, well, if we condition the setback as staff recommends, leave the 9,000 square foot permissible, then we sort of toss the ball into the applicant's court to figure out if there's some way to maintain his 9,000 square feet by juggling the parking, and I'll reserve judgment on that until we've heard public input. But also in the material we received, there was a letter from a commercial property owner indicating that a motel might need fewer parking spaces, something like 0.6 per unit. So my first question is, would that conflict with our current parking requirements? And second of all, if the applicant were to say, well, look, if you impose the setback, I'd like to keep my 9,000 square feet, because that may be the difference between being commercially viable and not, I don't know. Because it's a PD, do we have the flexibility to reconsider the amount of required parking?
Through the PD process, you do have the ability to adjust the parking requirement.
Okay. And would you comment on that, to the best of your knowledge, that claim that perhaps we don't need one space per room?
It'd be premature to do that right now. I'd like to consult with our consultant from TJKM while the council discusses this a bit more, and also while you receive public input, and then get right back to you.
Madam Mayor, that would be fine.
All right, any other questions? You're just moving your hand. Before we get to the public input, I noted that a couple of the council members stated that they had met with the applicant. I have met with the applicant. I have driven through and visited the site, plus all of Alberta Way, and also went into the development adjacent to the lodge and drove in and out of that parking lot. And so first of all, two things. I will ask if any of the other council people have visited the site. Mr. Brzezinski, Mr. Wasserman? Okay, everybody has. The question I have, Mr. Lortz, the question of the sight line without the red curbing came up at the Planning Commission meeting. And is that red curbing, if we should decide to consider it, something that would be a community benefit? Yes.
The red curbing could certainly be paid for through this community benefit offering, absolutely. And the one thing that we would probably want to do is the neighborhood has indicated an interest in a traffic calming effort, and I think we'd want to incorporate that whole aspect of it together, make sure clear sight lines are provided.
And I see Mr. Brzezinski. One thing else I would ask of the council here is if when you visit a site, besides sharing with us that you visited the site or met with the applicant or the neighborhood, if you learn something within the course of those meetings, and that something is part of your decision-making process that wasn't brought up at the hearing, if you would share that with us also so that we're all in the same place. Mr. Brzezinski.
Yes, ma'am. I met with the applicant twice and visited the site numerous times, probably followed you around that little circuit that you indicated. And one of the things I want to point out is that the entire east side of Alberta Way from Highway 9 up to the driveway of the property is red curbed already, and that the west side of Alberta Way is red curbed from, it looks to me, the juncture of the commercial driveway on the building opposite the proposal, all the way to the end of that Alberta Way drive right up to that commercial center at the end. So I know there were some issues raised in the Planning Commission about red curbing, and somehow it's all been taken care of as far as I can see, because the only parking now on street that I see is on the east side of Alberta Way from the property line of the proposal to the end of that housing development there.
The applicant may never get to talk. The place where I personally encountered an issue is when I was coming out of the development adjacent to the motor lodge, and to turn left to head back towards Highway 9, and there are cars parked along Alberta Way, that your ability to see cars coming off of Highway 9 and heading onto Alberta is obscured. And so that's what I'm talking about, and we'll just see how it all plays out during the public hearing. Any other questions of staff? Ms. McNutt.
Not a question, but just a disclosure that I also met with the applicant. I also toured the site. I also went through that maze and backed out because you can't get out of there any other way. And I also walked along Bella Vista because to see the site, since there were some planning commissioners that were concerned about how that might appear from up there.
Thank you very much. All right. At this point, we will have the applicant come forward. The applicant has 10 minutes. The applicant may have more than one person representing it, and if that's the case, you can choose who is going to speak for you, but still it'll be a total of 10 minutes.
Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. I'll keep this brief because it's a pretty robust record, and I think Mr. Lortz did a pretty good summary of the issues on the table, and you guys are in active dialogue, and I want to leave plenty of time for your questions and concerns to me. I'm Dick Scott. I'm a partner with Pelio & Associates of Saratoga. I live in Los Gatos. There is an ample record on this matter, as I'm sure most of you have reviewed over the last few weeks. We think this project makes a great deal of sense for the reasons in the record. We have worked with staff over 2 years to get this project before you, and we are prepared to answer any of your questions. I did want to just take a moment just to address a couple of the issues that that were just raised, brief though that may be. I do agree with Mr. Lortz that as you exit Highway 17 on what's presumably the west Los Gatos exit, it is pretty difficult to see the signage. And we currently have a 28-foot sign. And we originally talked about redeveloping this site. We thought, based on communicating with staff, that we would have some modicum of grandfather rights associated with that large sign. And the proposal that's on the table from us now is 15 feet, which is about a 46% reduction already. The other part of our proposal is that we're happy to live with that sign. We can reskin that sign and make it very nice as presented in our package. So that's clearly an option as well if the council feels more comfortable going in that direction. Regarding the red curbs, after some of our community outreach with some of the neighbors, they indicated, like the mayor's concern about either turning into Alberta Way or exiting Alberta Way if there was cars parked. We've been communicating with staff on that, both Ms. Davis and Mr. Parsons, and I believe Mr. Parsons just got after that very quickly and did some red curbing while we're in the process. So just so you know why maybe you saw one thing at one time, Mayor, and other people are seeing something else. And also, just to point out to everyone that as we redevelop the site, what is now an existing porte-cochere is going to disappear as we relocate the lobby to the center of the project. And so some of that visibility in entering and exiting the project will be greatly mitigated because we won't have this large structure to block us, and the actual opening to the egress and ingress is going to be greatly broadened. But that concludes my comments. I'm here to answer your concerns and questions.
Questions of Mr. Scott? Okay, I'll always start over that side. Let's go over here. Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you. I have one. It's regarding the setback issue. The question, setback, reduction of square footage, impact on parking, et cetera. My personal preference in commercial projects is a setback from the street, so you don't end up with tunnel vision. If all the buildings are built right up to zero setbacks to the sidewalk, you end up with that. I like where it's set back a little bit. There's some sidewalks, some landscaping, et cetera. Staff has made a recommendation. What are your thoughts regarding that recommendation? We've talked to a number of retail brokers that work prolifically in Los Gatos, Vice Mayor, and a number of tenants that, although we can't really start marketing because we don't know what our development rights are yet, there's been people that have made inquiries, and there's been people we were thought are logical tenants. So we've talked to people, and we, of course, have some experience on point. The three repeating themes that are important to the retail community's success is visibility, it is signage, and it's some sort of retail connection to the community. And so because the inherent features of the site are problematic, it sits down at the corner about approximately 7 feet. At other points on the site, it's much lower than 7 feet. I think we're struggling a bit with pushing that building back. The retail brokers specifically say, hey, listen, no one knows where you are. We tell people the name of the motel, and they seem a bit perplexed, and then we have to point to the Los Gatos Lodge to get someone, even some Los Gatos natives, to figure out where the site is. So their strongest recommendation is to push that building up as close to Alberta Way as possible so that you have some visibility so that it can address their number one concern. Obviously, location is very important, so retail requires a good location, and this is a very good location. And to our knowledge, there's only one Cloverleaf in Los Gatos. May I follow up, please, Madam Mayor?
Certainly.
Thank you. Another alternative, of course, if you to setting it, well, if you set it back further and you end up being taller, you can still have a visibility. So there is increased height, increased setback, increased height, because you're looking for exposure from Highway 9, is what you're looking at. When you evaluate those two potential elements of design, what do you see as stronger influence, more important? What's your research shown?
It's a good question, Vice Mayor. As we move the building, as Mr. Lortz pointed out, there are some cascading issues that result, right? Economies of scale, if the building gets too small, it's not that large of a project for retail because you need some synergy between the tenants for this thing to really be viable. I mean, we're trying to activate an underused, underperforming asset. Between those two, I would have to say that the setback's probably more important to me. But I think there's some trade-off, and I think you make a valid point.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Brzezinski?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Scott, I need to ask you about the concept of activation, because you've used that in the presentation of the Planning Commission. And I know that in inquiries of your potential tenants, that's been a message they've given you. And it seemed to me that there are two components that were raised. One is the proximity to the street of the building itself to give kind of a mass, and then the second is the signage. I've done a little bit of personal research just trying to look at other centers around town to see how the signage issue operates and how this issue of massing on the street operates. And a couple I would like to point out to you that for your consideration, the centers that seem to be most active are on Los Gatos Boulevard, include Cornerstone, which has only a ground level signage naming the center. There is no identification of individual tenants on that sign. Kings Court is another. They have two signs, but it's the same issue. It's only identified as Kings Court. If you go down the boulevard towards Los Gatos Almaden, then you've got a couple of sites that name only one tenant. If you go to the Los Gatos Village, the Trader Joe's is the title or the name of the single tenant with a multi-tenant property, and then the more graphic or aesthetic sign that indicates the name of the center itself. And also on the boulevard, there are good examples of the opposite, where you have the laundry list of tenants. And my impression is that in none of the major shopping centers on the boulevard is there a requirement for activation either of signs that indicate each tenant or massing towards the street. Now, the one that I would ask you to consider that masses towards the street is, of course, the Hollywood Video Complex. And to me, the massing towards the street actually diminishes for some reason the impression of that building. And I would think that you may want to reevaluate from this council person's perspective whether or not there is another issue about activation in Los Gatos, and it has something to do with the identification of tenants, the quality of the tenants, and then what you can do to promote the site exclusive of signage. I think the staff's recommendation that is within our commercial development guidelines, stating that it's a 10-foot height with 3 tenants at most indicated, might be something to seriously consider even within the context of activation. You choose the right tenants. I think that even though this is on Highway 9 and is in the exit pattern of Highway 17, I think it's going to be more neighborhood commercial service than actually highway, because I don't believe that the pattern would be established wherein someone jumps off 17, discovers that there's a copy center here or a dry cleaners, and says, I've got my dry cleaning in the back seat. I think what's going to happen is that it's going to be identified by the quality of the tenants. And in our town, what I've seen is, for the most part, you can have a relatively sequestered or hidden commercial opportunity that creates a synergy on the basis of the clientele that come in because of the identification rather than because of signage. So that would be as the mayor indicated, if you've seen anything on drive-through, that's my indication of what I've noticed in terms of the issues that you're looking for.
Thank you. I know there was a question in there. Mr. Glickman.
Well, I first of all would want to give the applicant an opportunity to answer a question if there had been one.
Thank you, council member. I guess to just give my perspective, I think there was an embedded question, council member, but number one, I couldn't agree more that tenant selection is going to be more important, and that's one of the reasons why we've agreed to work with staff to make sure that some sort of CUP is put on the property, because at the end of the day, we have to work with the town has to work with us in picking tenants that are going to be successful there, and yes, activate an underperforming asset. The reality is the motel is not doing as well as it should be, and people don't know where it is. I can only tell you what some of the same brokers that the town works with and the economic advisors of this town work with. When you ask a retail broker or a retail tenant what they want, they're going to say signage is either 1, 2, or 3. I would also like to distinguish a little bit your comments on some of these very large landmark addresses. When we go to a mall, we don't expect some of those stores to have signage on the corner monument, but you're going to a massive destination location. Kings Court, I mean, I can't compete with that size. Cornerstone, by the way, it's got a 39-foot tower. But in addition to that, I can't compete with that size as well. I am not a fan of the Hollywood Video site. I think it's overmassed and doesn't fit to my personal taste. But I think that size is more in line with what we have. Okay, it's probably a 10 or 12,000 square foot or 8 to 12,000 square foot neighborhood center. And I bet you anything that when that developer in the town was trying to get good tenants to go to that site, I can guarantee you those retail tenants and their brokers were really looking for some signage. So I can't disagree with you that the quality of the tenant is important, and it has a lot to do with how hard we work to try to get them. But we all know that intrinsically certain sites have advantages and disadvantages. One of our plights that we have to work with is that this is substantially below grade, and that it has historically not really done that well, and we're trying to overcome its weaknesses and listen to the marketplace.
Thank you for answering my question.
You're welcome.
Embedded question. Mr. Glickman.
Thank you very much. We always struggle with these things because we're the decision makers, but we're not the experts. But I think it's and I'm sure that the council would concur that if we want you to move forward with this, we want you to succeed. So I would want you to help me to understand exactly the two issues that we really seem to be focusing on, which is the setback and the signage. It would be my guess that if, because of the setback, a 9,000 square foot project becomes an 8,000 square foot project, that might have some significant impact on your likelihood of success. But I'm going to ask that to you as a question. My second thought, I don't want to say belief because you're going to educate me, is that the signage, it would seem to me, would be, in the course of time, more important for the motel part of the facility, because you have people from out of town tend to use motels, looking for it, and thereby signage would be important, whereas I would imagine that the retail component would be drawing its customer base more from locals who over a period of time would learn where things are. If either of those assumptions are incorrect, teach me now.
Well, I want to compliment your question. I think you've distilled some. Essence here. success is the theme. We're trying to maximize it for everyone in this room that cares about Los Gatos. And so that is the goal. The closer we get this building to Alberta Way, tastefully designed, the more successful it's going to be. That's my conviction. As the building shrinks, I think I'm going to lose some synergy. That's the reality of that. In terms of your point of what's more important, motel signage or retail signage, that's a tough one. All the retail brokers bring up signage either number one or number two, as I've said from the beginning. But in an intellectual vacuum to their comment, I think you make a good point. I think that out-of-towners would probably need signage if you play the walk-in factor significantly in your marketing. I'd like to say that eventually we'd like the recognition of a very quality offering in this town that's affordable, to have something to do with repeat business, as my manager, Mr. McClements and Mrs. McClements would indicate. So for walk-in customers, I would have to agree that motel signage would probably be more important for those out-of-towners.
Another question? Okay.
It's a follow-up question. It really is partly to staff. If the issue of signage, as it seemed I'm being told, has a great deal more to do with ramping up, initial success, getting people to recognize it, the launch, is it within our rational boundaries to permit initially some signage which after some defined period would need to be removed?
The PD could state that.
Okay. Could I ask the applicant if that concept makes any sense to him?
Well, I'm never going to turn down some extra signage for a splash for marketing. Okay, I've got some roots in the sales world, so I'm not going to turn that down. If it's an either-or question, I'm going to struggle with it because if you talk to some of your stars in your community, some of the coffee shops that would be potential candidates for this site, I think they're going to come in, sir, and say, I'd like both. Both is going to make me more successful, and hence this project more successful. And but if I don't get much monument signage for these tenants, then I would like that gratuitous gesture.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, I see none. Thank you, Mr. Scott.
You're welcome, Mayor.
I have 3 cards, and the applicant will have 5 minutes to respond to any of the speakers. I have one question of staff, Mr. Lortz. There was talking about this discussion of the parking lot, and in the parking study that was done, they used, one of the ones they used was Starbucks on Los Gatos Boulevard by Good Sam. Couple of questions. First of all, I personally think the Starbucks by Good Sam is really, really tight parking. And also, I've had a lot of people in the community complain about the parking at, what do you call it, on the one they were just discussing, the Hollywood Video. Is the parking that is contemplated currently for this project akin to either of those?
It would be similar. I think that the parking layout would be much different. You're dealing with 2 very, very tough sites when you mentioned the 2 that you just did. One is a long aisle, which is Hollywood Video. The speeds are high. The turning radiuses are tight. The success of the center creates some problems. So that is a very, very unique site, and I would say that the parking is tough on it. The other site up at Highway 85 is also a very, very tough site. This site will be easier to navigate than those sites.
Thank you. All right, the first card I have is William Swikert. And Mr. Swikert, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is William Schweikert, and I live at 144 Magic Court, which is right behind the hotel. I would like to ask that the council enforce the recommendations by the Planning Commission. I do favor the hotel renovation, I do. But my problem is the scale. It's just too big. What they're proposing is just too big for that lot. And I think there will be issues with the easement, getting in and out, and also signage. I also think that driving up Highway 9, it's beautiful right now. You can see the hills, and when the size of these buildings are there, we'll be looking at the back of buildings, so the view will be gone. I also want to state for the record that Alberta Way is a problem, and there is red painting, but it's in the wrong place. It's not really by the hotel, and that is a problem. And with the expansion, that'll be more of a problem. But down further is even more of a problem. There's no parking for a lot of the tenants who live there, so they park on the street, and you can't get around it. So we're going to compound that issue with more traffic up front. So again, I just want to state 2 things. One of them is that the size of the project, I think, is just too big for the area. And while I do favor renovation, I think the density is just going to be too dense. And the second is that something needs to be done about the traffic. And as any good statistics student will know, that the traffic report was done by national averages, which has little or nothing to do with, the real traffic there at that intersection. So, that's it, unless you have further questions.
Thank you. Questions of the speaker? Yes, Mr. Glickman.
Mr. Schweikert, thank you very much. I'm reading your testimony before the Planning Commission. You had raised the issue of the appropriateness of retail space at that location. I'm sure you heard my question to our staff, and you heard their opinion, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to, so to speak, make your case on that issue. Because you would, I don't want to quote it to you, but you seem to have a different view.
Thank you. Yes, I actually think, as I've lived there, back there for quite a while, I think anything that they build there is going to fail, personally. And the reason I do is because it's too remote. It's too remote. It's a hotel. It gets a lot of traffic. It's good for that. But when you put retail space there, it's too out of the way. Why would I want to go there, fight that intersection, and for example, to put my cleaning in, when I can go to a commercial development that has not only dry cleaning, but next door is a coffee shop, and down the street is a grocery store. So I think it's too remote, personally. I'm sorry, but I just don't think it's going to succeed. And I think we're going to be stuck with a huge building, looking at the backs of buildings instead of the view of the hillside.
Thank you.
Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Schweikert, 2 questions for you. One, as far as the people there that live on Alberta Way and the condos, townhouses, et cetera, the homes behind the existing motel, when I looked at that and I saw this idea about retail, I looked at it and I thought, wow, that'd be nice. Those people can walk from there over to these 4 or 5 places, maybe for lunch, maybe for dinner, maybe for jewelry, coffee, whatever's going in there. Okay, I don't know that. But it just seemed like that was an opportunity for them to walk to retail, walk to food, rather than have to drive. You go back there and you say, okay, well, there's stuff on Santa Cruz Avenue. Well, yeah, let's get in the car. And I just thought it was kind of neat where we were expanding retail a little bit instead of increasing density on Santa Cruz Avenue and putting a little retail pocket in an otherwise residential kind of area. So from that respect, I thought it was pretty neat. I appreciate what you're saying about, you feel it'll fail. I understand that opinion, and I understand the developers want to take a risk and do that. But what I'm asking is a roundabout way of saying the sign that's there. It's been reported the sign there is currently 28 feet tall, and they're looking at a 15-foot tall sign. Do you have any issues whatsoever with the height of the sign?
I think what concerns me more than the height of the sign is the brightness of the sign.
Okay.
Sure, I'd like a lower sign, but what I'm more concerned about is at night, a bright sign. That's really what I'm more concerned about.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Other questions? No, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The next card is Ron Boley.
Good evening. My name is Ron Boley. I've lived in Los Gatos for about 20 years. My offices are over on 409 Alberta Way, directly across the street from the proposed development. Excuse me. My office has been there for 14 years, so I've basically visited the site pretty much every day. I know you've mostly visited recently. In that time, our neighborhood there has really been void of any retail services at all. Not just a few, but really none. So when the proposal that this development be put in came along, I thought, wow, that really fills a void. That the offices that are down that street, including my own, the apartments, really could benefit from that. And, having whatever it is, coffee shop, you name it, certainly to be able to walk to something rather than get in our car every lunch hour, drive, and then come back would be a great benefit to me, to my employees, to the other people in the offices there, and I think to the apartment buildings there. So I just wanted to express my opinion that it certainly seems that this is a benefit to our neighborhood, to Alberta Way, which is really isolated from Los Gatos Boulevard, from Santa Cruz and the downtown area, and it is really not within walking distance or practical walking distance of a lot of amenities. Walking across that overpass is a real adventure, if any of you have ever done that. It's very dangerous, and walking up to Los Gatos Boulevard is another adventure. So generally, if you're in the Alberta neighborhood, you don't do that. So anyway, I really wanted to voice my opinion that this does fill a void. It does benefit the people there in our neighborhood. And it gives the town an opportunity, I think, to really dress up an important entrance to our town. I'm sure the developers and the town would work together to make that something that we really all love, or at least I would hope so. Anyway, that's my opinion.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Boley? No? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, the last speaker card I have on this is Citizen Ray.
Yes, speaking in the public interest only, okay? I have participated in all of the meetings that were held on this matter. And I was greatly impressed by the testimony given at the Planning Commission that the developer chose to ignore the Conceptual Design Committee. He said, instead, I'm going directly to the Planning Commission, never mind what the process is in Los Gatos. So he decided to try and bulldoze his way through the Planning Commission, okay? And he couldn't succeed. They voted to deny. And why haven't you got the chairman of the Planning Commission up tonight, as every other community that I've ever lived in does, when there's a denial at the Planning Commission level, you invite the chairman of the Planning Commission to give testimony and answer questions. Only in Los Gatos do you avoid this obvious procedure, okay, to bring out the best of the public testimony. It is disgusting. So in my opinion, what they're down to now is 4 pounds of you-know-what shoved into a 2-pound box. That's exactly what this horrific proposal is. It is a beautiful drive-by situation with all the appropriate landscaping. And all of a sudden we have this 9,000 or 8,000 square foot building jammed into this little corner there. Ugly. If you approve it, it will represent Los Gatos ugly. All for the dollar bill. The retail tax will buy your vote, or will it? So, I want to tell you, don't approve this unless you want to see Los Gatos turn into another East San Jose. Piece by piece, all for the dollar bill. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no other cards. All right, so then I will ask the applicant if he wishes. He has 5 minutes to respond to anything that has been said.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, citizens, for taking the time to be here and to articulate your interest in the site. I'll keep this brief, just a few perspectives on some of the comments. The environmental impact study that was done by the town's consultant concluded that there was only one potential view that was impacted, and that wasn't fully impacted at all, and that was before we lowered the tower from 35 feet to 29 feet. So that's what your consultant said, and so I don't think the views are gone. We very conscientiously designed this retail building, and I think this goes a little bit to the setbacks, Madam Mayor and council members, that we pushed the retail building as forward as possible to make sure that a minimum of views were affected, and I think that was accomplished. In terms of national averages in the traffic report, I think the town's traffic and parking consultant is here, but I believe both national statistics were cited and then a very focused study on specific restaurants and hotels, including this hotel, was done. Mr. Swickert, I'm glad that you do favor a renovation, and I hope you're wrong, and I hope we'll be successful, obviously, but I think that success does depend on a degree of visibility and some signage. I'll just, I know it's in the record, but we didn't try to skip the ARC. If that had been recommended to us early on, if that was the smart way to do this, we would have gladly done it. It wasn't recommended that we do that until very, very late in the process, about 1 month before, after about 17 months, 1 month before we went to commission. So we weren't trying to steamroller anyone. Obviously, projects evolve, and at that time, it seemed like a step backwards after 17 months of losing money. We needed to get on and get to the decision maker. That concludes my comments.
Thank you. Questions? Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you. I appreciate your summary and addressing some of the issues that were raised. I've got a couple more issues, and now's the time, I think, to ask those of you, if I may, Madam Mayor, before we close things up and discuss internally. There's a monument sign and a pole sign. The pole sign is existing 28 feet now?
Yes, sir.
Correct. The monument sign that you're proposing is 15 feet, code 7. Staff is recommending 10 feet, given that your project is what I call below grade. What I'm interested in this project coming out to be Mr. Scott, is you're in an area right now that is below grade and sunken. Okay, like I said, I feel for the people below Linden Plaza. Okay, I feel for you where your location, where your property is. The idea of bringing retail there, to me, is encouraging, and I think will benefit the offices and the residences around there. So that said, I'm weighing the factors and saying, okay, what kind of a retail development do I want there? Me personally, one councilman doesn't want one that's right up on the sidewalk. The 15 feet that the code requires, the 5 feet you're asking for, the staff's 10 feet, I'm pretty okay with that. I have not seen a project that has proposed too much parking. So my issue, my question to you would be this parking matter. If we go back to 10 feet, staff says we need to reduce the building from 9,000 to 8,000 square feet, so the parking is adequate. Do you have an alternative solution that would provide for adequate parking if the setback was increased from 5 to 10? Bless you.
We've got a lot of people smarter than me on parking, and one of them is in this room. So we might want to bring that up to Mr. Kruger if he's still here. Having said that, I do know that that TJKM's study in several occasions pointed out that they made some very, very conservative assumptions. Part of it has to do with people at the hotel already being there. Some of it had to do with people coming to the hotel in one car but having two rooms. Some of it had to do with the assumptions that are national that might be too conservative for this application. And so I think it was in this forum that someone suggested that maybe we can consider some sort of reevaluation of the parking requirements that the code says to match up more against reality, because TJKM says the parking is more than adequate, council member, and so maybe we can get some relief and still get a building big enough to have enough parking and activate this site.
Okay, thank you. What I'm trying to do is come to grips with, I want retail to go there, I want it to be attractive from Highway 9, and for me that means setbacks, and I want the parking to be adequate. I don't want to build something that's another problem. But I like your concept, but I've got a problem with a couple of this minute details, setback and visibility. But if your retail is there, I want you to have a sign that says, hey, I'm there. And it seems to me the sign, the staff's 10 feet exceeds our current code. Do you see an issue with the staff's recommendation of the 10 feet?
Yes, I do.
As obviously not being tall enough, not visible enough?
Yeah, I mean, I was out there. We were all out there, and I believe where the sign currently is, it's a couple between 3 and 4 feet below the center of Highway 9, below grade. So now you've got plus or minus 6 feet from that perspective. As you're coming from Los Gatos Boulevard, I think obviously it's almost de minimis until you get within 12 feet. And if you're looking at the sign like this at 12 feet, you're probably not being a good driver. So the sign currently is 28 feet. You've heard some neighbors that it's not the height that they have a problem with. Maybe we consider leaving the sign. In our application, we have said if you want us to reskin the sign, here's approximately what it could look like. Okay. And if we need to tone down the brightness a little bit, I think that's a worthy possibility as well. But I don't think 10 feet is going to get the job done if you want this site to be successful. And our challenge, and I think the staff was spot on, they said, when we first met, we said, we think the town needs a motel like this. They wanted the quality of the offering increased, as did we. We had other feasible things we could do with this development, but we had to put our thinking caps on this. How do we keep a motel that's affordable for this town and still make a go at some level of commerce?
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Brzezinski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Approximately 10 foot takes us from the floor to the top of the bricks. Would that be approximate?
I don't have my tape with me. It's in the car because I was measuring the Los Gatos Lodge line, but maybe that's right.
Okay. So that's what we're looking at on the street, basically with the staff's recommendation.
I think that's what you're looking at if you're staying at the base of the town, council member.
Okay. I'm going to side with Mr. Wasserman that I want to see that setback. I'm trying to look at the story poles and the proximity to the sidewalk, and I find that real tight. And I think that for us on that corner, there's a consistency with the treescape on the opposite corner that needs to be maintained, and I really don't see how you can do that if you build that structure right up to the sidewalk. I think the issue, therefore, goes back to, I think, the question that was raised earlier by Mr. Glickman and also Mr. Wasserman, is that the 8,000 foot that would be the result of maintaining the extent of the structure and maintaining the parking as so designated, that would be an issue for you to deal with as a developer. As I interpret the Planning Commission, I thought they were making these recommendations and were moving towards some type of conclusion. In fact, there was actually a motion to approve earlier in the meeting that then, with some further input and some further discussion, would have included possibly the issue of pulling back the building, reducing the mass by reducing the square footage, going with the staff's recommendation on signage, making sure that we're right on the parking and make sure we're right on the impacts on the intersection of Saratoga, Los Gatos, and Alberta Way. All of those things were in place, including some issues relative to community benefit. My sense was that your intention at that time was to just move it to council rather than to ask for a continuance or a return to the staff to deal with some of these issues. And my inclination, having heard the testimony and having reviewed what the Planning Commission has indicated, my inclination is to recommend the types of things, the types of alterations and mitigations that the Planning Commission was moving toward. I want you to be successful, and I really do think the use is appropriate. I think that you've had testimony here in the previous meetings from the neighbors and from the commercial tenants who say this would be a good thing for us, and I agree. I don't live too far away from there, and I would love to see something right there because there's nothing else in that particular section of town that imitates what you're asking to do. But I think there's going to have to be some compromise made here, and I think the compromise is going to have to go towards some of the recommendations, if not all the recommendations made through the Planning Commission process, and working closely with staff to accommodate the requests that are being made. I personally feel that the shared parking makes sense. I think it has environmental benefits. I do think that the studies relative to the 0.6 rather than 1.0 per room in the hotel, or the motel rather, is appropriate. I thought that broke out pretty neatly, the way they talked about taxis in and families coming and renting more than one room and so forth. But I'm going to ask that if there's a motion made tonight, that those be included in that motion, and that's probably what I could support. We haven't talked about architecture and site right now. One of the things I think is important for us, obviously, is architecture. I'm not particularly enamored with the architecture. I particularly have some difficulty with what would be the south elevation on page A5 of your diagrams. You don't have to go there, but it's number 4, Los Gatos Road elevation. That's what you're going to see from Highway 9, and it looks pretty much like a blank wall. You have those wood inserts to break it up, but I think that might be an issue for me. That's it. You got it. The arrows there. From the perspective of perception, I think if you're coming down the sidewalk or you're coming down Los Gatos Boulevard, that would be westbound on Highway 9, you're going to see what looks like the back of pretty much every shopping center building in a lot of our surrounding communities. And whenever we've seen that we've had a building, a commercial building that is visible from any other side, we've asked for 360-degree architecture. And that can be things as simple as what you do with maybe even window treatments and so forth. But I got a problem with that, and I think that we're going to have to go through an A&S process to finalize this anyway. But that would be something that I would raise as something needing attention. At this point, those are my comments.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Scott? Mr. Glickman?
Thank you. I want you, I'll repeat this, and I think this is true of the whole council. We want you to succeed. I'm very hesitant to encroach on the 9,000 square feet that I believe your business planning tells you that you need. I look at our discussion of setback, and I am in agreement that ideally the more setback, the better. I notice that we always seem to be talking in 5-foot increments. It's either 5 foot or 10 foot or 15 foot. And I suspect that if we tried, we could be, and I think the word compromise was used, a little more creative than that to come up with a win-win solution. I also heard it commented, I had mentioned earlier, and that staff seemed to concur, that perhaps if we do ask you for some more setback, but at the same time say, well, based on what we've heard, because we have the authority to do it, we can ease the parking requirement enough that we get the setback that we want, because aesthetics is extremely important. This is a gateway. While at the same time giving you the square footage you need to operate your development successfully, and to put in what would otherwise, because in some places in hotel isn't involved, retail parking, we have some standards and we apply them, we might be able to be a little bit more flexible so that we get the setback, you get the 9,000 square feet, and there's enough parking to make it work. And that, if that were in the motion, I would heartily support it. On the question of the sign, now we get into every council member sensitivity. When I see signs with every business listed, I'm sorry, I think strip mall. I understand that you need the activation. I understand that you need to make the site recognizable. I'm more sympathetic to your needs for visible signage for the motel. I think for the retail, with adequate advertisement, people will find it, especially because it's going to be local people using it. So there, I would not be as accommodating on the monument sign with the shopping list of all the stores. In terms of the height of the sign, as long as its visibility is adequate to make your motel succeed, because those are the people who are going to be looking for it, I think anything that reasonably achieves that goal, I would be comfortable with. That is a very big sign up there now, and I would not be unhappy to have it come down a bit, as long as it won't make the hotel fail. So that's my thinking at the moment.
Does anyone have a question for Mr. Scott?
Well, he could have said it in like what I said.
Ms. McNutt, is this a question for Mr.
Oh, yeah, I understand how this works. We're still in the public hearing, not doing council discussion. My question is, if we were to continue this item tonight, and the rest of us have a chance to also weigh in with what we are saying as our concerns and priorities, do you feel that you would be able to spend some more time researching the possibilities, analyzing the project from your point of view, and work with staff and be able to come back with a revised proposal that meets everybody's needs?
Councilmember McNutt, I think it's possible, but my strong preference tonight, I've been at this for over 2 years and we're losing money, is to try to get a plan as defined as possible, subject to some good architectural and site work, as the ex-mayor, I guess almost everyone here is an ex-mayor, but as Mr. Brzezinski pointed out, and I have a couple thoughts on that maybe we can try to get some definition, because I've been trying to answer your questions. I'm convicted that signage is that important, as is visibility. But on the other hand, I mean, we've been trying, and what I would like to propose that maybe you consider is for example, if you take up Mr. Glickman's idea of maybe it doesn't have to be exactly in round numbers. Maybe the council can say, here's the minimum that we can live with, and vote on that. For example, if you picked a 7.5 feet additional setback from what we've proposed, that could be item 1. In terms of whether we get a 9,000 square foot building or an 8,500 square foot building or an 8,000 square foot building, maybe you make that junior to the setback and working on the parking. And maybe you say that parking should be subject to TJKM, your consultant, making a positive statement that this works. Right now, they're saying that not only does it work, but it's more than adequate, and there's a bunch of conservative assumptions.
Okay, so let me interrupt you and tell you that I won't even ask Mr. Lawrence. I would not be comfortable approving a project with loosey-goosey numbers like it's going to be somewhere between 8 and 10,000 or 8 and 9,000.
The setback would drive it, though.
I know, but I would need to know the exact square footage of the building and the exact number of parking spaces before I could approve it. So the parameter thing doesn't work for me.
Okay.
Further questions? Is this a question, Mr. Wasserman?
It was, it is,
Thank
and
you.
shall be forever and ever. Amen. Mr. Scott, you just threw out, for instance, 7.5 feet additional. So that's 12.5 feet? Because you were talking 5? 5 plus 7.5?
There's a 5-foot distance, Councilmember, between the sidewalk and where the building currently starts. If you add 7.5 feet to that, it'd be 12.5 feet.
So yes. Yep, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? I see none. Mr. Scott, thank you.
You're welcome.
I will now close the public hearing and turn to the council. Question for staff? Ms. McNutt.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence, could you run us through our options? We could approve the project as proposed. We could deny the project straight out. We could continue it, or we could send it back to Planning Commission. Are those the 4? Do we have others?
Those are 4.
Mr. Lawrence, and the council could approve it with modified conditions.
That's where I was going.
All right.
And
Well, sure, but, yeah, okay.
And the conditions, and what I attempt to do at these meetings is try to craft a condition that is acceptable to the council, not loose, very specific, and I'd be happy to try to do that. But those are your options. Really, there's 5 options.
Mr. Glickman.
Question for Mr. Lortz. Suppose the council said, look, 7.5-foot setback, to pick a number. How many parking spaces, assuming we keep the 9,000 square foot building, how many parking spaces does that leave? And in your professional opinion, could we find that to be adequate, or would that be clearly inadequate?
That's a tough question. I was quickly looking at the plans. It is difficult to say, but maybe 3 spaces would get reduced. 1 per 300, that's 900 square feet. That's close to the 1,000 where we're at. PDs are by their very nature, even though we have a plan that is pretty detailed here, and it's written into the PD that they're conceptual in nature, and the final square footage is determined, and the final layout is determined at architecture and site approval, because there is some flex going on here. So if you were to approve the project with the conditions that we've added in, we've indicated that the building will probably slide by about 1,000 square feet. Now, are they able to make that up in the site? Maybe. They might be able to make up about 500 of it. I just looked at it by adding a couple feet to the building on the east side of the building. That would happen during architecture and site approval. It may necessitate or allow for the reduction of a parking space. Again, that can happen during architecture and site approval. So the concept that I was toying with is, right now it says, the PD says 9,000 square feet. I would add up to 9,000 square feet. The specific size to be determined during architecture and site approval. Now I'll add one more for the sake of our discussion here, if with the mayor's permission.
Certainly.
Regarding the sign, and I'll just put something out there, is the concept of allowing the pole sign to remain for a period of 1 year from the date of occupancy, at which point, after 1 year, the sign comes down and a monument sign is erected per the PD as written. Just an idea.
Other questions? All right, we are in council discussion. Ms. McNutt.
I do have another question. What magic language do you have regarding the parking? Because the way I read the staff report, when you did your, the traditional way, which is very conservative, on estimating parking needs, it totals up to 100. Using a different methodology that is probably more reflective of the way these types of businesses really work, it brings it down to 77.
Correct.
I want some guarantee that we don't get carried away and all of a sudden it's going down much farther than that, because it feels to me like we've already reduced it from 100 to 77.
It really wouldn't be reduced by more than a space. Because the square footage of the center is not going to slide down very much. It might be 500 square feet. That's typically a parking space, but we'd go back to TJKM. So I'm saying it's probably maybe 76, but that's it. And we can get that determination tonight for you if you'd like.
Okay.
Mr. Lortz?
Yes.
I am quickly trying to go through your PD proposal here, and where is the provision, the paragraph on parking?
It's in the official development plans. The parking spaces are shown in the official development plans.
Oh, okay. And so if we do go forward and if we do say one space is variable or fungible, where would we put that?
The parking space?
The fact that there is a variable, there could be 76 as opposed to 77, because I do share the concern of loosey-goosey.
What I'd like to do is consult with our TJKM for just a moment on that one, so that we could build that in, so it won't be loosey-goosey.
All right. Okay, let's do this. I was going to do this anyway. I know we are in the middle of council discussion, but to give me a 5-minute break and give Mr. Lortz a 5-minute break, we'll come back in 5 minutes. this meeting back to order. First, Mr. Lortz, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes, I do. Based on the conversation before the break, staff is recommending for council consideration condition 5, where it talks about setbacks. The minimum setbacks are those specified by the CH zone or otherwise shown on the conceptual development plans. The front setback shall be at least 10 feet. The building shall be reduced as necessary to meet this setback without reducing the parking below 75 spaces. So there we get specific. Now it's up to the applicant to build in additional square footage on the east side of the building, and they can do that.
Questions of Mr. Lortz? Yes.
So if we're saying 75 parking spaces is the minimum.
Correct.
Make it happen.
Correct.
And that's adequate for the demand.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, discussion, a motion?
Well, I'm going to try a motion, Madam Mayor.
Mr. Glickman.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to move to overrule the Planning Commission on the grounds of policy and to approve application PD 070 with the modifications indicated by Mr. Lortz in that on section 2, number 1, it shall say construction of up to 9,000 square feet, and under section 5.5 setbacks, then the last sentence, without outdoor parking spaces below 75 spaces. Other than that, I will move approval as written.
Is there a second? Before we get to the second or consideration of it, Mr. Lortz.
Just two things. I think there was an issue about sign, but I think some council members were ready to jump on that one. And then also, this is a recommendation from the Planning Commission.
That's right. We're not overruling them. This is a recommendation. And so we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Ms. McNutt.
Well, two questions. One of the maker of the motion, if he wants to address the signage issue, and a question of staff of the order that we have been given here. There's some other things that I think are supposed to be done before this motion is actually made.
Well, let's address that second one first.
Well, I have a question. Maybe this would go, I don't know, to the planning director or to Ms. Sloan. I see that there are a number of motions regarding negative declaration and so forth that precede the PD, which is actually the last one, but it would seem to me that they would all be, that they are all triggered by whether or not we have a PD with which we agree. So my question for staff is, can we go forward with this motion?
I think it might be preferable, instead of making that specific motion before the other items, to indicate that that was the motion he was going to make, to see if you could develop consensus around that, and then go back and take the items in order as set out in the staff report.
Thank you.
So modified.
All right. So now where are we? Mr. Brzezinski.
Well, I believe then if we're trying to modify, then we have to take up the signage issue. And in so doing, that's item 14 on page 4 of 17. And the ground sign shall not exceed 10 feet in height. It may not include more than 3 tenants. I'm going to recommend that be the language that we adopt, but I am interested in reviewing Mr. Lortz's proposal for the 1 year extension on the current sign to allow for the activation of the site and then the removal of the sign at that point. My assumption is that that sign as it exists is not within the building envelope, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Hate to build a building around that sign and then have to take it out. So with that in mind, and the language would reflect that if the council so inclined.
And the maker of the motion would certainly accept that.
Hold on. Does the maker of the motion agree with that?
Yes, he does.
Oh, and then Mr. Brzezinski, is that a second?
No, I think what we're doing right now is we're just, as the attorney
Doing the
indicated, we're
consensus,
just looking at the consensus issues, and then we'll go back to the start. But that would be my inclination, yeah.
With those changes, and I would imagine, Mr. Brzezinski, that it is you would support the motion, if there were one on the floor?
Probably, if there were one on the floor, I'd be inclined to, yes, I'd be inclined to go in that direction.
All right, Mr. Wasserman?
Yes.
Ms. McNett?
Yes, with clarification that having the pole sign remain for a year would be optional if the applicant wanted, and also that it would also be limited to 3 tenant names maximum, just like the monument sign.
All right, and Mr. Glickman?
As maker of the phantom motion, that would be agreeable.
All right, and I agree with the motion with all its conditions. So that being said, we can now go through the process on the first page of the staff report.
Okay, well, since I've stuck my proverbial neck out, I will then move step A, which is to make the mitigated negative declaration according to attachment 4. That is a motion.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Glickman, seconded by Mr. Brzezinski. Discussion, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously.
Okay, moving right along, I will move to adopt the mitigation monitoring plan according to attachment 2. So moved.
Second.
All right, motion by Mr. Glickman, seconded by Mr. Wasserman. No discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Okay, I would now make the required findings according to attachment 1 and approve the application subject to the modified conditions in the plan development ordinance. That would be attachment 3 with the modifications indicated during council discussion. Do we need to enumerate them now, or is that adequate?
Yeah, that's okay.
I can enumerate them. And
Please enumerate.
okay.
Enumerate away.
On section 2, condition 1, construction of up to 9,000 square foot commercial building. The section 5 setbacks, condition 5, the second sentence would read, the front setback shall be at least 10 feet. The third sentence shall read, the building shall be reduced as necessary to meet this setback without reducing the parking below 75 spaces. And then finally, there was the condition 14 will remain as is with an additional sentence that would read, as an option, the existing pole sign is allowed to remain for up to 1 year from occupancy. That's one sentence. And then then the next sentence would read, after 1 year, the pole sign shall be removed. Then the monument sign shall be installed.
And
Mr. Brzezinski.
And I believe Ms. McNutt indicated no more than 3 names.
No more than 3 names, and that's the way it's reading.
Okay. With that excellent enumeration, so moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, a motion by Mr. Glickman, seconded by Mr. Brzezinski. Discussion, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously.
Okay.
Direct the clerk administrator to read the title of the ordinance.
Ordinance of the Town of Los Gatos amending the town code affecting a zone change from CH to CHPD for property located at 55 Los Gatos Saratoga Road.
All right, we're back to a motion.
Move waive the reading of the ordinance.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Glickman, seconded by Mr. Brzezinski. No discussion, all in favor? Oh,
Aye.
I have a question.
I'm sorry, retract that one. questions?
Thank you. I just want a clarification from Mr. Lortz, if I may, on one item.
Certainly.
Thank you. In what we're almost finished doing, the south elevation will be subject to A&S approval.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right. So we were at, ready to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously.
And then I will finally move to introduce the ordinance to effectuate Plan Development PDO 701. So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Glickman, seconded by Mr. Brzezinski. And I just, at this point, I'm going to support all these motions, but I just wanted to just note for the record that in reading the 200 pages of transcript from the Planning Commission meeting, it was my sense that the Planning Commission felt as though, for whatever reason, that it either needed to get the consensus or agreement of the applicant, or alternatively deny the applicant and send the applicant on to the council, where my thinking was that they also had the option of doing just what we're doing now, which is approve with condition or approve with modified conditions. So that's just me communicating my thoughts to the Planning Commission. I will now call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay. All right, we are now to Agenda Item 10, which was pulled from the consent calendar. And while I'm going to have Mr. Kreitz speak first since he pulled it, but while he's doing that, just a couple of things I wanted to share with the rest of the council. You will note that there are two parts to this agenda item. There's adopting an ordinance. I'm looking at the recommendation, adopting an ordinance and adopting a resolution. What has been requested from our town attorney is that we either go forward on both this evening or neither. In other words, if there's any question with the ordinance as stated or with the resolution, that we continue both items. The other matter is actually for Mr. Kreitz, who has, wherever he is, who's pulled the item from the consent calendar. What we are doing this evening is not reopening the public hearing, and we are not reopening the public hearing to hear new evidence. What we are doing is determining if the resolution accurately reflects the record, the previous record. We are not creating a new record. So we're looking to the adequacy and the accuracy of the resolution. At this time, before I have Mr. Kreitz come up, I would ask staff if there was anything they wanted to add before we begin. All right.
None.
Then, let's see. David Kreitz, you want to come up? You are the person who pulled it from the consent calendar.
So I have to object to that. I think that since you're taking a public comment at this time, that the public record can be modified. My statements modify the public record, and the written document that I passed around modifies the public record as well. I'm Dave Kreitz at 15900 Roshan Terrace, and I urge the Town Council to delay adoption of the ordinance implementing this project until the following issues are addressed. As enumerated in other documents, this project does not comply with the California Environmental Quality Act. It's a perfect opportunity for the Town Council to show their commitment to the environment by redesigning the project so that the environment is protected. The project is inconsistent with the town's general plan, including the introduction, land use, open space, conservation, and safety sections. The project is inconsistent with the town's infill policy because town guidelines state that site designs with houses backing up to the creek may cause the creek to be a detriment to the neighborhood.
In addition, the size, intensity, and density of the development are inconsistent with the neighborhood. Unlike the neighborhood, the homes are all two-story, the floor-to-area ratios are too high, and the density is significantly greater than the neighborhood. The project violates the town's tree protection ordinance by proposing to remove 34 ordinance trees and attempting to transplant 6 more away from the creek. The project does not comply with the Town Code, Chapter 29, Article 9, regarding floodplain management. This project is a flood hazard property. The project does not comply with Town Code Section 2990-100 regarding flood-related standards for subdivisions. The project does not comply with Section 2980-080 regarding the intended use of PD overlays. The project does not comply with the town's guidelines and standards for land use near streams. In addition, I urge the council not to disregard the comments of Verna Jagor and Larry Joman. Mr. Joman, after all, is listed as one of the authors of the town's guidelines and standards for land use near streams, and Verna Jagor is one of the only 16 consultants named on Santa Clara County's list of consultants qualified to perform biological assessments. They're experts, and their expert comments should be considered. I urge you to show the town of Los Gatos that your promises to protect the environment are not just words. Please protect the environment, our creeks, and our trees, and vote no on this ordinance.
Questions of Mr. Kreitz? Seeing none, thank you. The next speaker on this is Citizen Ray.
Madam Mayor, there's one additional issue that is important, okay? And that issue is a request for a motion for reconsideration by you tonight on this matter, okay? California state law provides that a motion for reconsideration can be made at the very next meeting after the time that the matter has been adopted, and that is tonight. And that's the law. So you have that before you. I have requested it along with Mr. Kreitz, even though he didn't mention it. Okay? So I ask you to deal with that. You either approve the motion or deny it tonight. You can refer to your town attorney on that. What is so, in my opinion, disgusting about the resolution is the fact that at the Planning Commission level, the idea that the infill policy had been ignored by the staff was refuted by the staff, okay? And it made the statement the infill policy didn't apply. And now, in the resolution, they talk in quite an extensive fashion that it does apply. It does apply. And it applies on the following basis, is what they say. What they are ignoring, and that is Sori Ori Korb, the town attorney, is ignoring the fact that every one of those homes is a two-story, flat-sided box, okay? Does that blend with the neighborhood? I don't think so. That is a basic consideration. And only one of those homes has a basement, and that is the development issue du jour in Los Gatos today. If you want to do a big home above ground, you better think about reducing the above ground square footage and put it underground, where it doesn't apply in the FAR. And only one of the 7 homes has a basement. So I say it doesn't blend, okay? Furthermore, Lortz over there, in his staff report at the Planning Commission level, made the statement the town has not adopted a riparian policy. The town has had the duty to do so since it adopted the land use elements near streams passed down by the collaboration of water people and so forth. There's been a year has passed since that duty was transferred, and Lortz has done nothing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, done nothing, negligent.
I have a question.
City attorney, city manager, do you hear that?
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Ms. Sloan, there has been an issue raised with regard to whether or not we have a motion for reconsideration before us, and then my question would be, if the answer is yes, does that change the scope of the evidence that we would be considering this evening?
Your question is, if you want to reconsider?
Do we have a valid motion for reconsideration before us, and if so, what is the process at this point?
Well, you do not have a valid motion for reconsideration because only one of you could move to reconsider, not a member of the public. I think, the person that spoke asked that you reconsider. Now, you closed the public hearing, so if you wanted to try and reopen the public hearing, you would have to set that for a future meeting, and you would need 3 out of 5 votes to do that. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay, questions of staff? Mr. Glickman.
Yeah, Madam Town Attorney, I do not see before me a formal request for reconsideration. The request could come to the council. We could or could not choose to do that. What it says is, please pull the January 22nd, 2000 council consent item for separate consideration. I urge the town council to delay adoption of the ordinance implementing this project until the following issues are resolved. So I don't see a motion for reconsideration here. I simply see a request to delay action on item 10 tonight. Is that correct?
That's the way that I read this memo, yes. I think the person that wrote this is asking you to delay implementation and to reconsider. If you were to reconsider, then I think the only way that you could do that is to reopen the public hearing and take new evidence. And so that gets back to what I just said, is you would need 3 out of the 5 members to set a new public hearing.
All right,
in
thank
order
you.
to take new evidence.
All right, now that being said, I have 2 cards. Both people have spoken. Is there anybody else in the audience wishing to speak on this? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and look to council. Mr. Brzezinski.
Madam Mayor, per your initial indication, we should both adopt the resolution and adopt the ordinance together or not at all. Is that correct?
Correct.
Then I'd like to make the motion to adopt the resolution of the town council making findings regarding the approval of requests to change the zone from R18 to R18 PD and to demolish a single-family residence, and also to adopt the ordinance to change the zone from R18 to R18 PD for a 7-lot subdivision for a lot line adjustment between 2 parcels zoned R18 and approval to demolish a single-family residence.
I'll second that, and if I may make a comment.
Certainly.
The motion, of course, is to move ahead with the process as it originally was on the consent calendar. It was my understanding from our town attorney's excellent description that there was kind of a 2-step process. We might want to consider not taking the action that the motion is about to take, to consider other issues which might cause us to reconsider. I think, given the fact that the motion has been made and seconded, if the council acts on that, it makes those other actions, interesting though they may be, rather moot.
All right, further discussion? I will note that I will not be supporting the motion for the reason stated when it was originally before us, which is with regard to the ordinance itself. It has architecture in sight going back to the DRC. And I understood the Planning Commission to have requested that the ANS go back to them. And same reason for not supporting the resolution, because it references the ANS having been reviewed by the Commission, and I don't believe it had. Further, Mr. Brzezinski.
Yes, and I believe that in all deference to the mayor, that I'm satisfied that the intent of the policy, the council policy relative to return to the DRC for ANS was adequately served by the extent and complexity of the original proposal and all the architectural work that was presented to the Planning Commission in its earlier meetings, and the number of opportunities the Planning Commission took over that period of time to make their own evaluations of the architectural and the site. And so I believe that my willingness to support this motion as the maker is related to the fact that that all of that was accomplished previously. I'd also like to comment, however, that there was no new information presented from the public tonight that would in any way, shape, or form indicate information not previously evaluated and calculated into our earlier motions. And therefore, there would be no need for us to make the recommended request for the revisiting of this. And so with that, I hope that we can make and resolve this problem once and for all.
Further discussion, Mr. Glickman.
Okay, not to beat a moot horse, but in respect for Mr. Kreitz and for the public who's listening, who kind of wonders if we're kind of doing a fast shuffle. Mr. Kreitz in his letter raised 8 points. I won't enumerate them. I will merely make the comment that all of the matters that he raises were considered and adequately discussed and to this council member's satisfaction resolved at the time that the council took its original review and action. So it is for that reason that I'm supporting the current motion and did not feel any need to either delay this or even consider reconsideration.
Further discussion? Seeing no hands. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Passes 4-1. All right, now, other business, there is none. Next, we have council matters. Any council matters? All right, seeing none, I have a council matter. But before I have my council matters, okay? I am going to ask, as part of my council matter, for Pamela to come up here and join me, please.
Pretty sneaky.
We're not going to do anything. We're just going to stand here.
Oh, my gosh.
You can't leave. Pamela, these are for you from all of us in appreciation for being not only a magnificent interim town manager, but for the great work that you did and the wonderful attitude that you brought to that work. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Again, it was my great pleasure to serve each and every one of you, and it was a wonderful experience for me to work with you, to work with the organization, the community, and I appreciate your thanks to me as well. Thank you. Thanks.
And Madam Mayor, following right on, Pamela, on behalf of the executive staff and the entire staff organization, this will be easy for you to carry with that. We have a little token of thank you from the executive team for your leadership.
Well, Mr. Larson, I'm going to consider that your manager matter. Do you have any others?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. One other brief manager matter, and I'll harken back to the oral communications at the start of the meeting. Given the media coverage of the last weekend and emails and reports that have been delivered to staff, the tenor of the election that is before this community has turned difficult, and I think I was pleasantly surprised at my first council meeting, sitting in the seat, for the respectful and responsible tenor of the discussion that occurred previously. Nonetheless, I did want to share with the council that we have repeatedly and will continue to direct staff to be unengaged in any political matter that is before this community on the ballot. As the council is well aware, state law prohibits the use of public resources for any political purpose, and it is our job as your staff managers and representatives to ensure that is the case. However, there is one place we do get involved, and that is in the enforcement and upholding of city or town laws and codes. And there's two areas that I have directed staff to be diligent, if not aggressive, in ensuring compliance with the town ordinances. The two areas are, first, the posting of political signs in the public right-of-way, and the Parks and Public Works Department will be taking a lead responsibility over the next 2 weeks, including evening, weekend, as well as daytime coverage, to ensure that the requirement that no political signs be posted in the public right-of-way is adhered to. Second, working with the police department, we will continue to increase our enforcement of allegations of theft and of political signs on private property. And we are hopeful that that does not result in citations, but we are prepared to move to that step if we find any evidence of repeat or organized theft of signs by any individual or group, be it overzealous youth or parents setting poor examples for their kids, whatever it is. We will take the action necessary to uphold the town and state law.
Thank you. All right, at that point, we are done. Meeting is adjourned.